you that you don't. And so enjoy the afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thanks so much. Take it away, Professor Myers.
I will. Thank you, Dean. So I'll do more of an introduction of myself later on in the lecture, but right here's my contact information if anyone needs to send me a personal email, which I get quite a few, and that's fine. I enjoy interacting with students. So I guess it's time to get started. See if I close that window. All right, so what we're going to do today, I guess this kind of lecture, I started teaching in the Intro to Writing course here at Birmingham School of Law about 4 or 5 years ago. And I noticed that there were some fundamental things that students entering the law school didn't know that you should know. So a big purpose today is for me to cover some topics which honestly are a little bit remedial, but also I'm also here to kind of help you decide whether you really want to do law school or not. So we're going to go, this is a 4-hour lecture that the deans asked me to try to squeeze down to 3 because of the Zoom aspect. I did it yesterday for half your class. This is the second one. And it went okay, but it really is more of a 4-hour lecture, but I will try to squeeze it in. So the first hour of the lecture today, I'm going to actually introduce you to some new ideas. And the dean isn't really joking. My big objective today is to change your life. If your life's not different when this lecture is over with today, then I haven't done my job in this Intro to Law School lecture. And there'll be 2 kind of real reasons you're in law school, which aren't what you think. And then there's also, we're going to talk about in the first hour, kind of your 3 biggest obstacles. And I'm going to give you some ideas on how to deal with them. In the second hour today, we're going to go over some of the civics you're supposed to know. It was definitely a surprise to me that some basic ideas about our government and how the law works and what lawyers actually do was missing to a lot of the first-year students. So that's one reason we're doing this lecture. And then the third hour, I'm going to just try to give you a big picture grasp of how to do legal reasoning. It's the most important thing you learn in law school, and it's going to help you tremendously. I think you'll have 2 weeks of Barbary course introduction classes coming up next before you start your main classes, and I will definitely be helping you today in all of that. So great. And as I said, if you have any questions as we're going, put them in the chat, and I will endeavor to get to those questions right before we take our break usually. So, all right, let's jump right into it. Big surprise, but biggest misconception law students have coming into law school. You are not in law school to learn to be a lawyer. You're not. Most of what you will learn is actually how to be a lawyer occurs when you're a lawyer and you're practicing law after you graduate and pass the bar. A lot of you may be paralegals or may have worked as law clerks or have worked at some law offices or have family that are lawyers. If you talk to any of them or if you see what lawyers actually do day to day, 90% of it is not taught in law school. So you are not going to Birmingham School of Law to actually learn how to be a lawyer. You are entering into a weeding process. We are trying to weed people out from being lawyers because we have too many, and that'll be one of the obstacles we talk about in a minute. The bar exam and the job market. All right, those are 2 of your 3 biggest obstacles, and we're going to talk about both of those. The bar exam is in the job market. Okay, they're 2 of your biggest obstacles, and these are really the 2 reasons you're in law school. The point of my lecture today, I'm speaking to you as if you are intending to do 4 years of law school, pass the bar exam, get your law license, and then start practicing law, finding a job, and working as a lawyer after you do all of this, okay? That's the point of this lecture. And then a lot of you will be in, I guess, not a lot, but there'll be a few people. There's other people that are going to law school for other reasons. And if you're going to law school for other reasons, that's fine. I'm not trying to get you to quit. I'm trying to talk the rest of y'all into quitting. If you're going to law school because you've always been interested in the law, you're older, you're retired, you just want to study something, I've had students like that, and they're great students. If you're in law school for, like, you're in the corporate ladder and you want to put it on your resume so you can get a promotion to the VP of something at your business, okay, that's a good reason to get a law degree. Having a law degree is not a bad idea, but I'm talking to you as if you are intending to actually become a licensed attorney who wants to actually make money practicing law when you graduate. And those are both your biggest obstacles and the reason why you're in law school. You will learn to be a lawyer when you actually are out there practicing law, but you have to first pass the bar exam. All right, so let's talk about what's on the bar exam. If you didn't already know this, and occasionally we'll get a student that don't, when you finish law school, if you actually want to be a lawyer, get your law license on the wall, you have to pass the bar exam. It's a bear. It used to be 3 days when I took the Alabama bar, but it's actually a 2-day exam now, and we'll go over it. So the first day of the exam, you'll have 6 what's called multi-state essay exam questions, and you'll have 2 multi-state performance test questions. And I'll talk about the multi-state in a minute. On the second day, you'll have 200 multiple choice questions, and I'll talk about in a minute why those are so hard. But if you do not pass this exam, it does not matter. You can make straight A's in law school. You can have a 4.0 from Birmingham School of Law, and you will not get to be a lawyer if you do not pass the bar exam. All right. Let's look what's on it. This is not a little bit of stuff. These are the topics on the bar exam. I'll let you read over that for a minute. This is a lot of material to learn in the next 4 years. It's a massive amount of material. I mean, there's thousands of pages you're going to have to read, study, and learn for each of these topics. And then there's 2 other parts. I mentioned the multi-state performance test. So this is a cool part of the exam where they actually will give you all of the law you need to know. They'll give you all the facts you need to know for the question. And then your job is to write a usually 5 to 7 page answer to the questions. But you get all the law. You don't have to have anything memorized. And you get all the facts. So all they're doing in the multi-state performance part is testing to see that you know how to think like a lawyer and analyze like a lawyer. And that is a lot more why you're in law school than actually learning how to practice law. And then there's also going to be a professional responsibility. There's the ethics exam. You have to pass that as well. All right, so that's the bar exam. Now, let's talk about why that's your first great obstacle. So these are the numbers of students from Birmingham School of Law that took the bar a couple of years ago. The numbers haven't changed any really. This is just an example year. As you can see, these are really dismal numbers. The first-time bar takers is this middle category. 50 students took the bar in February of 18 from Birmingham School of Law for the first time. Only 17 of those 50 students passed it. And for the students that took it, had already taken and failed it before, some of them even multiple times, 104 Birmingham School of Law students took it for at least the second time, and only 12 of those 104 passes. If you don't pass it the first time, the chances of passing it the second time aren't great. It's not even great to pass it the first time. So look at these pass rates. This is your first big obstacle, because it really begs a question, and it's not facetious. It's not me trying to be funny. I generally am asking you, why do you want to do this? I mean, why do you want to put yourself through 4 years of law school when the chance of passing the bar exam is so dismal? And then, while we're looking at these numbers, let me go ahead and I'm supposed to give you my background so that you can see. Well, first off, a big reason to listen to me is I'm just a professor at the law school. You're going to the law school. Okay, every professor you have is great, and you should listen to what they have to say and believe what they have to say. But if you hear my background, this lecture, which is in a minute hopefully going to become very life-changing for you, I'm going to add a little credibility, I hope, to what I'm trying to say today. I've been practicing law for over 20 years. If that's, again, what your goal is, there we go. I actually have 4 graduate degrees, as crazy as that sounds. Besides my law degree, I have which I got at Cumberland on full academic scholarship. I have an MBA. Some of you probably have that. I also have a master's degree in education. So I teach with a master's in education, so I have a lot more knowledge than your typical professor will here at Birmingham School of Law about the education process. So the things I'm going to talk about today, I think, again, are more mindful. And then just for funsies, actually, because I do mass torts law, which is a lot of biomedical science and stuff, I got a master's in that too. And those bottom three y'all did while I was working full time. So I know a little bit about what y'all are doing, trying to go to school and work full time. Do I teach any education law classes? I don't know. Do we have education law classes at Birmingham School of Law? That might be a fun elective, but it's not on the bar exam. So stop thinking about it, because and this is the point. So when I finished the Alabama bar exam 300 years ago, when I took it by candlelight with pencils, it was a 3-day exam back then. And my wife at the time drove me from Montgomery to Nashville. And that's the first time I started studying any Tennessee law. I had like one of those general Tennessee law review books from Barbary, and I spent the car trip. This is after finishing the Alabama, exhausting. You're mentally exhausting. You're dead after doing the bar exam. I got up the next morning and started the Tennessee bar exam without really studying, and I passed both of them. And you saw those pass rates. I mean, it's pretty. This right here is enough for you to be, okay, for the next 3 hours of my life, I really, really want to listen to what Professor Myers has to say and take it seriously, okay? That's who I am. So if these numbers are so dismal, it gets worse when you look at the job market. So this is from 2016, the last study I could find. Of the 50 states in the union in 2016, Alabama was the 5th worst state for finding a job as a lawyer. And that's counting Puerto Rico, which is a territory. So really, we're the 4th worst state. It's harder to find a law job in Alabama than in New York. That's how bad it is. And here's why. So in 2016, we had almost 15,000 lawyers. Can I highlight this? No. We had almost 15,000 lawyers. That's people who had passed the bar exam. We just talked about how hard it is to pass the bar. And there were licensed attorneys. Of those 15,000, less than 7,000 of them actually had jobs working as lawyers. And the numbers aren't any better 4 years later, I promise you. So that means in 2016, we had almost 8,000 extra lawyers than we needed already. These are pretty grim numbers. When you look at the bar exam numbers and you look at these numbers, this is not a pretty picture. So when I ask the rhetorical question, why are you in law school? It's actually not a rhetorical question. And then of these 7,000 employed lawyers in Alabama, over half of them were either solo practitioners or in groups of 2 to 5 lawyers, which is like you and your buddy share some office space. Maybe y'all get a paralegal, y'all are splitting her costs or his costs. It's actually even worse when you think about if you want to get to a small, which is like 6 lawyers or more firm, or a big firm, there's just not that many jobs for those kind of people in Alabama. That's where you make really more money than you make as a solo practitioner in a small law firm. I mean, as a solo practitioner in a small law firm, I think they said that an above average lawyer in that situation might make $50,000 to $75,000 a year, which is good money. I'm not knocking it, okay? But you're gonna get a stimulus check. You're not so rich you ain't getting your stimulus check at that, okay? I mean, so you got to think about if you can pass the bar exam and you can't find a job, even if you're successful though as a small solo practitioner in a small firm, you're still only going to make so much money. You could make 50 to 75 doing a lot of different jobs that you don't have to kill yourself in law school for. I'm just saying. Now, what's the solution? If the job market is this terrible, which it is, and the bar exam is this so hard, what do you have to do? All right, my number one suggestion to you. You don't have to do law school. You don't have to do Birmingham School of Law or any law school. You don't. It's perfectly reasonable, and I always get a few students every year who do go ahead and decide, nope, I think this is still time for y'all to get money back from the dean, etc. Okay? It's perfectly fine. I have a lot of respect for people who choose not to do law school after realizing how hard it is and everything we're going to talk about today. It's perfectly normal reaction to all of this to decide you would rather spend the next 4 years of your life doing something different. That's perfectly okay. All right. So then if you're not going to quit, if you haven't already turned off the call, I don't see anybody dropped yet, then you're going to have to overcome your worst obstacle. I mean, it's the worst obstacle you have to passing the bar and finding a job. That's you. You are your own worst enemy in doing this. So for the rest of this first hour, I'm going to talk to you about things that you need to be doing different in your life if you are going to have any hope of passing the bar exam and any hope of finding a job. Now, some of you might already have a job, and if you know 4 years from now, if you pass the bar, you know exactly what law firm. Maybe it's your mom's law firm, or maybe it's you're already paralegaling there, and all the lawyers are like, yeah, sure, we'll hire you as a lawyer if you pass the bar, because they know you're not going to pass the bar. At least it's really unlikely. So they get, sure, come on, you can work for us. All right. So if you have a job lined up, that's great, and that's one of the 2 criteria. So you can just focus on the bar exam. But for the rest of you, you have a double-headed monster ahead of you, passing the bar and finding a job. And the biggest enemy of that is you. So I have a couple books today I'm going to go over. But let me talk about arrogance. Okay, so one of the biggest problems, especially the ones that have already been working in the legal field or have family in the legal field, I see, is arrogance. Guys, you have to come in to law school pretending you don't know anything about the law. If you think you already know stuff, you are just hurting yourself. And I'll explain why later more. But you've got to get rid of any arrogance you have. If you saw those bar result numbers earlier and you're like, oh, I'll be in that 30-something% that passes it on the first time, whatever. Yeah, I'll be one of those 3 people, 1 in 3. You're already probably set up for failure. You really generally are. And then the lack of commitment and discipline. Commitment and discipline is, to me, the answer to these questions. Like, how are we going to get through 4 years of law school and actually pass the bar? I'm about to lay out for you some things that I'm going to say you have to do in order to have a chance at passing the bar exam in 4 years. Okay. It starts with becoming obsessed. So here's one of the books today I'm going to suggest you read, Be Obsessed or Be Average by Grant Cardone. The abbreviation BOBA stands for Be Obsessed or Be Average. All right. So the average Birmingham School of Law graduate, if you're the average Birmingham School of Law graduate, you don't pass the bar exam. The bar exam is only passed by a select few. So average is not good enough. This slogan needs to be one of your life mantras from now going forward. If you're not willing to be completely obsessed with passing the 2024 bar exam, you do not need to go to law school if you're intending to actually practice law. Mediocre and average performance in law school and in studying for the bar will not get you the result that I'm suggesting you want, and that is to be a practicing lawyer one day. You have to become obsessed with the 2024 bar exam. And what does that look like? So here's some suggestions from this book we're going to talk about. First off, you have to agree with me. You have to, from right now, looking at the statistics, that if you're not obsessed with the bar exam from today forward, you are not going to pass it. Your only option is to be as ridiculously crazy about it as I'm about to describe you need to be, and the things you need to be doing. All right. The other reaction people have right now is you're doubting yourself. You should be doubting yourself. Doubting yourself is a very reasonable emotional response to what you're hearing. And for some of you are hearing it for the first time. The doubt you're going to have is not just going to be today. Like, can I pass the bar exam? Can I find a job? You're going to have doubts through law school all the way through. You have to choose every time you have the doubt that you can do it. You have to choose to stay obsessed with the grind we're going to describe. We're going to describe a grind in your life you got to create. And the way you create that grind is you have to be a control freak. From the rest of your day to day to when you get up the next morning, everything in your life has to become absolutely controlled by you to the fullest extent to which you can control your life. You have to start scheduling your time. You have to start scheduling your minutes of your time. And the only way you guys are going to be able to do that, I understand what your lives are like, is to build an obsessed team around you. All right. If you're single, means you do not have a spouse or some live-in significant other that you are stuck with, stay single. Law school and passing the bar exam, if you're going to be obsessed, you do not have time to be doing dating. You don't. If you're married, okay, wait, I shouldn't say that one. If you're married, you've got to get your spouse on board tonight after this lecture. We're going to email these slides out tomorrow. Go over it with her, him, with them. You have to get your spouse or significant other completely obsessed with you and passing the 2024 bar exam. This is not, hey, we're obsessed for this semester. This is, we are obsessed for 4 years with passing the bar exam. Okay? Then you have to talk to your boss. If you have to work a job, okay, I get it. If you can quit your job and just do law school, do that. Now, I know there's very, very, very few of you guys who can do that. Because what you are on taking, and again, it's okay to quit, you're going to be working full-time, you have family commitments and friend commitment stuff, and you're going to be trying to do full-time law school. All right, get out of your head now that Birmingham School of Law is anything but full-time law school. They schedule the classes so you can go to the classes around your full-time job. You are not shorted in any way from the students like myself who had the luxury of going to law school full-time, and that's all we did. You're going to be going to the same classes, studying the same materials, doing the same homework and assignments that full-time law students do, with no pity, no waiver. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. You get no help. I mean, it's going to be full-time job, full-time family, full-time law school for 4 years. Just so you hope you can be one of the 3 people that pass the bar exam, 1 in 3 people that pass the bar exam the first time, or the 1 in 9 people that try to pass it on a second time or later. So the only way you can do that is to build an obsessed team. Don't have a job. If you have to have a job tomorrow at work, if not later today, because I see some of y'all are at work, you need to sit down with your boss. And you need to get your boss to buy in and be like, excuse me, ma'am, I need to talk to you. And you need to get her to agree that you are going to be obsessed with the bar exam and that that's okay. Meaning, you need to take as little responsibility as work as you can. You need to not try to advance your career for the next 4 years. You need to try to be doing as little work as you have to, because we're gonna go over your study schedule in a minute. You're gonna be studying all the time, even at work, as you can get away with it. All right, so you got to build the obsessed team, and then listen. It's gonna be easy today to be motivated by the things we're talking about in these next 3 hours. It's going to be easy to be enthusiastic. It's going to be, sure, you're going to be doubtful. You're going to have a little fear. That's normal. That's real. But the enthusiasm you have is going to be okay to carry it forward. Maybe a month, you might feel this kind of obsession, enthusiasm, maybe even through most of the semester. But by final exams first semester, especially coming back from the break after Christmas, it's going to be really hard to maintain the level of obsession and persistence and grind that we're talking about, really. So how are you going to do it? That's a serious question. If you know yourself, if you know you're like, yeah, I'm going to work really hard at something for a few weeks, quit law school today. Don't do this. This is not, hey, I got to work hard this week and I'm going to be a lawyer. It is 220 weeks and then studying for the bar exam. It's a lot of studying and work. So if you know this about yourself, you need to identify that as one of your weaknesses. We're going to talk about weaknesses later. All right. More good books. Oh, because this is what you got to be obsessed with. No. Let's go back to these essay and these multi-state question topics. This is a lot of material. You have 4 years plus some bar prep time to learn this material cold. There was plenty here for you to study all the time for the next 4 years. All of your free time, as crazy as that sounds, needs to be directed to studying for the bar exam. And fortunately, the classes you start with this first semester are on the bar exam. So the best thing to do is to study hard for the classes you have. And as you study for the classes you have and you do the work we're going to talk about, you kind of create what's called an outline of all the material for that course. Like I think you're taking torts this semester. When you're done with your torts class this semester, if you studied correctly all semester, you will have the material you need to take the torts part of the exam, bar exam, in 2024. So don't get overwhelmed like you got to study all of these materials right now. You just got to start studying the materials that you have in front of you for your professors. All right, and then the networking thing. And did I miss a slide? Hold on. Okay. So it carries over, this being obsessed carries over to networking, is because networking is how you're going to solve the other big obstacle I laid out for you. If you don't know where you're going to work 4 years from now as a lawyer, then I'm saying you should quit. And if you aren't going to quit, if you're going to persist and do this, then you're going to have to be obsessed with it. And just as you're obsessed with the bar exam, you need to be obsessed with finding a job. You don't wait till you pass the bar and you're a licensed lawyer and then you try to find a job, okay? That doesn't work. What you have to do is network. And here's some sources for you to think about. And the first one is all these beautiful people in this Zoom call right now, okay? Your classmates. You guys have got to be good to each other. You've got to get to know each other. You've got to be some of your best friends in life for your future are probably in this Zoom call right now and you've never met them. Or maybe they're in my call yesterday. They're going to be in your torts class this fall. They're going to be in your writing class. You need to network together and help each other and find people who are just as obsessed as you are with passing the 2024 bar exam and study your butts off together. Now, there's a lot of other sources because even listen, it's not just about some of them. You might find a job from your classmates. I know I did a clerkship for the Alabama Supreme Court when I graduated, and a student a year ahead of me, he was the clerk before me, and he suggested to the Supreme Court justice, hey, you need to meet Frank and, hire him. So your classmates you have at Brigham School of Law can actually help you find jobs. But there's a more subtle and more important way that your classmates can be a huge factor in your success as a lawyer. If you are going to end up as a licensed lawyer, meaning you pass the bar, and you end up either practicing in a firm or, again, as you saw the statistics, more likely you're going to be in a solo practice or just a couple of lawyers working together scenario. Where do you get your clients from? You will get a lot, if not most, of your clients from your law school classmates. So let's say that you decide to set up a real estate practice. You're doing house closings. You get your law license. Let's say you were a paralegal doing this for a long time, so you already knew how to do it. And you get your law license, and now you're closing houses. Well, let's say number one student in the class, Mary Smith, she got an actual real law job at a real law firm. She was number one in her class, superstar networker, knew the right people. So she has this great job. So she gets a client. She wins them a lot of money in a case, and they're like, hey, we're going to buy a house. You know a real estate lawyer. You want to be such good friends with your classmates, and you guys want to be such a tight network, that classmate of yours, Mary, she turns and says, oh, yeah, I know this guy or this girl, and she gets them to call you and say, hey, they need a house closing. They're going to come see you. 4 years of networking with your classmates. So honestly, and I have cut out a lot of the bad language, But listen, don't be a dick to your classmates. Be nice to each other. If you're a crappy person and you're crappy to your classmates, if you piss people off, you're going to get a lot less work as a lawyer, and you're going to probably have a harder time really with jobs in your whole career. The law community is small. You saw that 15,000 lawyers. That sounds like a lot. And it's a lot because there's not a lot of work for those 15,000 lawyers. But of the 8,000 practicing lawyers, a lot of us know a lot of us. There's a lot of networking. Your reputation really matters in the law field. It really matters. And you're setting your reputation amongst other lawyers now, the first day of law school forward. So there's a lot of reason to be obsessed with networking with your classmates. Another great topic, our source of networking. As much as the Alabama Law School and the Cumberland Law School students like to think it's so cool, they're at a full-time law school, spending all that money, yay. They have all these really smart professors, these academics that like to teach really, these great theories, blah, blah, blah. You know what they don't have are professors that are actually out in the courtroom, actually meeting with clients, actually doing the work they're teaching, okay? You guys have such an advantage over the Cumberland and Alabama law students because your professors are real lawyers that are, a lot of them even went through Birmingham School of Law and become successful doing, the very thing I'm trying to get you to do. Network with your professors. If your professor is like, hey, we're grabbing a beer after class next Saturday, go get a beer with your professor. You don't even have to drink. Get you some unsweet tea and pretend you're drinking, okay? I don't care what you do, all right? I wouldn't go drinking too much because remember that reputation thing. But every opportunity you have to learn from your professors, talk to your professors, get to know your professors is going to help you find a job, help you get more law work. Because most of the professors now at Birmingham School of Law do a really good job of when they do hire people, trying to hire Birmingham School of Law people. The last paralegal I hired is a first-year law student ahead of y'all, in the year ahead of y'all. You can actually find law jobs through your professors and clerkships, and if you can't, volunteer. I know that sounds ridiculous, but just say, hey, let's say you're really interested in domestic relations. So you take the domestic relations class and the professor is great. And so you're like, ask him just straight out, do you have a domestic relations case I could volunteer as a clerk and help you with? Maybe they need some research done for some motions. Maybe they need a brief written to a judge. Maybe they need some even investigation work done if they'll let you do that. I mean, look for opportunities with your professors to get engaged and get involved in the actual practice of law that they're in, if it's an area that interests you. And oftentimes you won't even know what area of the law is interesting to you until you hear about it for the first time from a professor. And then another thing that professors do at Birmingham School of Law, and you want to encourage them to, is they bring in visiting lecturers. We get some fantastic visiting lecturers. I know my dad teaches here. He's a criminal lawyer. He's even older, than dirt. But he, I think last semester he had the district attorney for Jefferson County, Danny, came in and was a lecturer one day. I know Alabama Supreme Court justices have come in and lectured, appeals court justices, big time lawyers in town who are some of the best at what they do will come in for a day. I always try to bring in some lecturers when I'm teaching. So you have not only a chance to network with your classmates and professors, but also the visiting people that come in and speak to your classes. Look for any opportunity you can to connect, touch base, get an opportunity to all network. And then the alumni. The alumni are becoming more and more successful. We have some Birmingham School of Law graduates who are actually doing really well. And so if you get invited to an alumni event with the law school, I think we have some occasionally. Any opportunity you get to do networking, you need to be obsessed with coming and meeting with them and talking to them, okay, every time. So I teach first-year writing, and I teach advanced writing for the bar exam, and I teach ethics, and I think this year I'm teaching evidence law. Okay, so I have, this point here will make your point. So the bar did a really good job of trying to figure out when they hire new lawyers, what do law firms look for? And look at the number one overwhelming response. Generally, they're looking for people they already know. It's really hard, as you guys may know this from your real world lives already. It's really hard to get a job somewhere when you don't know anybody there. Okay? And if some of y'all look real successful. I'm sure y'all have hired people before. Generally, you hire people you know. Okay? The last 3 paralegals we hired at my law firm were all people I knew really well, including a cousin. You know what I'm saying? So it really matters who you know, and the networking I'm talking about is a big part of that. So be just as obsessed with networking as you are with passing the bar exam if you want to overcome these 2 big obstacles. So let's talk about how you do that. How do you change your life around so you can actually succeed at this stuff? All right, I've already given you these points from the Be Obsessed or Be Average book. Okay, but here's another great book, the Deep Work book. So at the tactics level, at just the basic level of your time as a human being, all right, you've got to quit multitasking, all right? This book is really good if you want to study why I'm telling you this, all right? You suck at multitasking. You think you're good at it. You really do. Everybody thinks they're so good at it, and you're really not, okay? All the research shows that if you want to learn something or do a good job at something, it's the only thing you're doing, all right? You've got to turn off Netflix in the background. When you're in your professor's law classes, do not have ESPN up on your webpage watching baseball scores or something stupid, okay? You have to get obsessed about being focused on what you're studying and what you're learning. Quit the multitasking. And why do we do all this multitasking? Because somewhere along the line, we've gotten this idea that we're not allowed to be bored, okay? What the F's wrong with being bored? You can be bored, all right? You don't have to stop at a red light and pull your phone out. How many times did I see? I'm like on my horn honking, go, it's green. Get your nose out of Facebook and go, drive the car, okay? Because for some reason in our culture, and I see a lot of millennial and younger looking people out there, it's gotten really bad. We have gotten this idea that boredom is so bad that we are obsessed with stopping it all the time. Okay? If you're going to be obsessed with passing the 2024 bar exam, you have to embrace boredom. You have to bore your own ass off for 4 effing years. Okay? You do. Stop the multitasking and embrace boredom. So what does that mean? Wow, I saw a lot of faces right now go, oh, no, I can't do this one. Yes. When the lecture's done, or even on the 5-minute break we're going to take here in a little bit, uninstall your social media. Have a nice little last post. Hey, I got this little bar exam thing coming up. I'm going to be gone for 4 years. And log off Facebook. Okay? And don't even get me started on Snapchat. There's no reason you ever have to be on Snapchat while you're in law school. You're not sending anything that's going to help you pass the bar exam. You know, oh, look at my food. No! Look at my study notes. Take those pictures and send them to yourself. Yay, I'm studying. All right? I'm being serious, guys. This is not facetiousness. Quit social media. Embrace boredom. Stop multitasking. Drain the shallows. Think about everything in your life that you can get rid of and get rid of it. You do not need to watch the next season of Bachelor. Okay? You do not need to buy the next battle pass for Fortnite. You actually can skip the college football season. Okay, wait a minute. I may have gone too far. Okay, most of you should be in class on Saturday anyway, so you shouldn't be watching football anyhow. You've got to drain everything out of your life that you can possibly drain, and guess what that includes? People. Remember I talked about building the obsessed team? You got a boyfriend, girlfriend that's not as obsessed with you passing the bar exam as you are? Dump them. Break up with them. You have friends that are always asking you to go out late at night to get drinks? Do they Are they in the legal profession? Do they know lawyers? Can they get you a job when you graduate as a lawyer? If the answer to that is no, don't have those friends anymore. And I know that sounds awful. It sounds awful, but quit social media and drain the shallows of all of this kind of stuff. Your life has to become this overwhelmingly obsessed. You have to become overwhelmingly obsessed with one idea: passing the 2024 bar exam. So here's a great book too. Damon John from Shark Tank, Rise and Grind. Your 4 years of life ahead of you now, starting with today, has to seem a lot like the movie Groundhog Day with Eddie. Wait, who was that guy? Anyway, Bill Murray. Yeah. So you have to set a schedule where you've drained the shallows, you've gotten rid of everything you can possibly get rid of in your life, and all you're doing is studying. It's all you do. Like, because there's some things I'll give you some tips. Be determined, embrace the grind, pay your dues. Yep, this is all good. Be true to yourself, the power of the grind. Yeah, we'll go over these. All right. If you're going to get rid of social media, and the answer to that is yes, you're going to get rid of social media. It might be okay to keep like LinkedIn, something you're using for networking. That might be the only thing you can do with your social media, is network with lawyers and people that can hire you as a lawyer or can send you cases to work on. All the time you right now spend on your phone, you can replace it with study materials. So my system, I believe in, you create these bar exam outlines that you're going to study for 4 years with. And all of the parts of the outline, you turn into flashcards. You have digital versions of flashcard apps on your phone. So that time you're sitting at the red light waiting on it to turn green, you're now flipping through your law school flashcards. Yeah. Talked about be determined, embrace the grind. Okay. You have to schedule your day in such a way that you have hours to study. A good rule of thumb is that you're spending 3 to 6 hours at a minimum studying for every class you go to. Oh, we had people come late. All right. Well, maybe this is recorded. You can catch the first part because it's pretty important. So as you embrace the grind, pay your dues. Too many of you, before this lecture especially, we had too many law students who were just doing the little bit you had to do to get through law school. Like, you didn't care much about your grades, or if you did care, you just did enough to make the grades you wanted. And then you decided, okay, when I graduate, I'm going to spend a few months, and that's what I'm going to study for the bar exam. Well, that's why you see the bar exam numbers as dismal as they are at Birmingham School of Law and really almost everywhere. You cannot wait to study for the bar when it's time to take the bar. You've got to be this obsessed with your daily grind at now, from day one, to pay your dues. And then the best way to motivate yourself is be true to yourself. Why are you wanting to go to law school? Like, let's just deep breath and think about that for a second. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Did you think it sounds cool to be a lawyer? It is on TV, but it's not like it is on TV. Is it like a prestige thing? Like, my daddy or mommy will be proud of me if I'm a lawyer? I don't know. You want to get rich? Yeah, that's okay. I don't mind being rich. I don't mind people getting rich. All right. I like rich. Rich is good. If that's your motivation, that can be a very powerful motivation. All right. I'll come back on the 3 to 6 hours thing in a minute. But you need to take a hard look in the mirror and decide why you're trying to do this really difficult journey of law school I'm describing, because it's really hard to get rich as a lawyer. We have way too many lawyers. With way too many lawyers, that means the work that lawyers are doing is spread out too far. I mean, really nowadays, even the people at big law firms are making, $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And for almost everybody in this Zoom call, I'm sure that sounds like you're rich, okay? Nowadays, that's not really rich. That's just you're well off. You're doing okay. You're above. You're kind of in that upper class a little bit. But honestly, there's not a lot of you are going to have opportunities to make 6 figures as a lawyer. You're just not. There's only going to be a few people that make ridiculous money, like the 7-figure money. You make that by doing like mass torts. If you do want to do mass torts, you can research with that. That's like when, Roundup causes cancer and you sue for that kind of stuff. That makes real money. All right. But car wrecks and all that stuff, you hope to get one really great case sometime that makes you have some money. But when I'm saying being true to yourself, you can absolutely be motivated to have a great career, because your career may suck right now. Making 50 to 75,000 may seem like a great job to you, and I'm not knocking it. Do it. If you want to put yourself through this and make 50 to 75 a year, if you're lucky, do it. Okay. But you've got to really figure out for yourself what your motivation is. Now, I mentioned domestic relations. I see a lot of students, maybe you've had some experiences. Maybe you went through like a baby daddy fight over some kids and some money. It's usually always about money. Or maybe your parents got divorced when you were, 12, and now you're like, oh, I want to be a lawyer to help kids have a better experience than I had when I was 12. That's absolutely great. If you have real altruistic reasons, things that you want to make the world a better place, and that's your jam, more power to you. Use that jam to focus, though. Make that your motivation. You've got to be true to yourself about it. And then the power of the grind. So what's really cool about what I'm describing, about you completely changing your life so where you're obsessed with studying for the bar exam all the time, is that as painful as it is, especially the first few months, if you are able to persist, you're one of the few people that can find the motivation to stick with this and not just do a great job at first, you're going to start thinking better about yourself. Your self-esteem is going to skyrocket. When you get to the point where you are working your ass off for the bar exam and you know it, and you have drained the swamp of all this extra stuff in your life, you've gotten rid of the negative, toxic people you need to get rid of, you've changed your work career around to help you become a lawyer or find a job when you graduate, you're doing all the networking you need to do, when you've put all of the effort in and you're doing it every day like Groundhog Day, you get up and do it all over again. You get up and do it all over again. You get it up and do it all over again every day. There's actually a really cool self-esteem thing that happens where you will actually feel proud of yourself. And that's okay. It's actually really motivating to do that. It's like the runner's high after a hard run or something. You get it all the time. All right, so we're going to take our first break here. I hope that I have scared you at least with how difficult the road is ahead of you. You have 4 years to learn to pass the bar exam, and you have 4 years to find a job. And put any questions y'all have in the chat window, and I'll hit them when we get back from this quick break. Okay, see you in a minute.
How long did he say? How long?
5 minutes.
If anybody was there, like the first 30 minutes, I'm gonna say 4 of us were not there because we were in a whole other Zoom meeting. So if anybody would take the liberty to, maybe summarize what maybe happened in the first 30 minutes, that would be great.
I'll tell you what he said in like 3 words.
It was really easy.
Everybody quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Just quit.
Yeah. No, basically what he was just trying to summarize is the difficulties of actually being successful even after being a lawyer, and the difficulty of being a lawyer if you don't have the time available, or if you're not committed to actually going through and doing the time, putting the time in and working and things of this nature. But I think it's more than possible. From my understanding, compared to other Alabama schools of the research that I've done, Birmingham School of Law, they prepare their students very well, and they have very good pass rates versus other schools. So I'm almost positive that people will be in a good position if you do the work like he said, and you actually do make those connections and speak to people.
All right. Thank you for the good summary. I appreciate that.
I was also told this morning these are being recorded so they would be available. I don't know if that's a stream or online or an email, but the whole thing should be available from what I got.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Victoria, to answer your question about that, you just have to get certified or take the bar for another state. It's just like you would do here to practice anywhere else. Like you would just need to go and take the bar for another state or study for the bar.
You got to wait 4 years.
Different states vary. Tennessee is you have to practice and be in good standing for 5 years. Florida is 10 years. But there's also the DC bar that you can take in a lot of, I don't remember how many years, but you can take the DC bar and that opens it up to a lot more states.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you.
That's what I was told. Yeah, DC is definitely one to get.
Sorry. So actually now Alabama is part of the uniform bar exam. So we take we take the same bar as a lot of other states. You can Google the uniform bar exam and a map will come up. And if you click on each state, you will see that which ones take the same bar exam as us and which ones allow non-accredited schools.
Gotcha.
It actually is a ton, like New York, North Carolina. Most of the states up north allow it. Some of the odd, like Wyoming and Montana, don't. California does, or California doesn't take the same one or something. But there's a lot, and every year it's getting more and more. So like when my husband went through VSL, when he started, there was only 13. I think there's 38 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it actually is, it's different, and I don't think that it's not as difficult to practice in those states anymore. I know Georgia doesn't and Florida doesn't, but a lot of times once, like she was saying, once you practice, you can take their bar, but now you don't necessarily have to. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, so I missed how the non-accredited school is different from an accredited school and like wanting to practice out of state. Could somebody please explain that to me again?
Yeah, so basically sorry, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Each state has its own admissions process to become a bar attorney. Some states, like California, Louisiana, and I think Virginia, I think there's 2 other states. They don't require you to have a Juris Doctor at all. You can just pass the bar and be admitted to the state bar. They don't recommend that, but you can. Alabama is kind of unique because it allows you to, you could get a degree from Birmingham School of Law and still be eligible to take its exam. And you would be admitted to the Alabama bar. And then as far as reciprocity, being able to waive into other jurisdictions, you'd have to read each state's criteria. For example, earlier someone mentioned Florida. So with Florida, you could theoretically become a barred attorney by graduating from Birmingham School of Law. However, you would have to practice law for 10 years prior to being admitted to the bar in Florida, or have had 26 hours of education from an accredited law school on top of wherever you graduate non-accredited. So there's different entrance criteria for each one of those jurisdictions, just depending. Once you're accredited or you're admitted to the bar in Alabama, you can waive into the DC bar pretty easily because DC kind of has reciprocity just about any other state and territory. But then each additional jurisdiction after that, it becomes kind of dicey. It's case by case basis. Even if you're admitted to the uniform bar exam, you theoretically could take your score from the Alabama bar and try to go to another state. However, they're going to have a education requirement to be accredited ABA. So it even passing the UBE, Uniform Bar Exam, presents some challenges when you come from a non-accredited university. So just kind of had to read it and figure it out. But there's ways to do it. It's just, like I said, it's case by case.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Everybody mute. We'll get back into it. Chat questions. I'm trying to find the ones for me if there are any. Okay, so yeah, we're being recorded. I know yesterday's lecture was really good, so y'all may want to, if they have a recording of yesterday's, watch that one. It's the same material, it's just I talk off the top of my head. ESL is not accredited. Yeah, that's about that. Okay, 3 to 6 hours daily or weekly. Okay, we're going to talk about this a lot, how much you need to study. So law school uses the Socratic method a lot, and there's a slide on Socratic method later in the lecture. We'll get to it then more. But if you haven't like a 3-hour torts class, then you should have studied about 9 hours for that class before you go to the class. So it's 3 to 9 hours for every 3-hour class you're going to. And you'll see why in a minute. You'll see why in a minute. That's what I mean. This is full-time law school. This isn't, you're like, oh, I got 9 hours of class a week. Well, that's fine. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about it. Westlaw stuff, which I don't have anything to do with. So she is a really great lady, Professor Fontana. All right, so now I'm going to move into a little bit of the remedial. So in the first hour, I tried to talk you into quitting law school. If you're going to stick with it, you have 2 really big obstacles: the bar exam in 2024, finding a job, and then the biggest obstacle is yourself. Are you going to be willing to be as obsessed with law school and the bar exam as you have to be to have a chance at succeeding? We looked at the statistics. The average student is not going to pass the bar, and the average student is not going to have a job. So if that's you, if you're in those average groups, then what's the point of you doing this for the next 4 years? And we talked a lot about how to kind of change your life. You've got to get rid of everything in your life you can possibly get rid of. Entertainment, friends, spouses. Oh, don't be having any children while you're in law school. So that's another one. No kids. Stop it. If you have not figured out what causes children, figure it out and stop doing that thing. Okay? You do not have time for causing kids while you're in law school. All right? At least figure out how to stop the kid part from happening. Seriously. When would you have time for a kid? A new kid? Most of y'all who already have kids, you already know you don't have time for the ones you already got with working full time and doing the work I'm describing for law school. When are you going to have time for another one? Don't do that. No. Okay. And you're going to break up with all your boyfriends and girlfriends you can. No, but seriously, you have to be this obsessed with the law student work and the bar exam. So I'm now going to transition into the little bit of the remedial kind of stuff, but it's going to kind of blur right into legal reasoning. So let's just kind of talk about kind of why we have lawyers and what do lawyers actually really do. All right. So it's like The Walking Dead. Now, while you're in law school, you don't have time to watch TV shows. So, you can save yourself some money. Just go ahead and cancel your Netflix subscriptions. You don't need them. All right, all your little Apple TV and all that stuff. Just get rid of all of it because you don't need anything. You don't have time for this. But just for the sake of this discussion, how The Walking Dead explains law school. It's not because you're going to walk around like zombies for 4 years, but a lot of you will feel that way. I quit watching Walking Dead, I think when Glenn got killed, but I don't think I watched any more after that. But I like a little bit of these apocalyptic type shows because who are the real bad guys in these shows? Okay, yeah, the zombies are scary and all, but if you watch this kind of stuff, the plot lines, it's not the zombies that are the bad guys. It's other human beings, okay? Newsflash. Human beings are really shitty to each other. And that's why we have to have law. If there wasn't a law against murder, half of y'all would have killed somebody already, and the other half of y'all be dead right now. You're like, I wouldn't kill somebody. Well, good, somebody would have killed you. Thank God we have a law against it. All right. It really is, though, kind of, so you have a better idea what's going on here, is we have to have this legal system in order to police how badly human beings treat each other. All right. We treat each other really badly. That's why we have to have really good lawyers and really good laws. You hit somebody with a car and there was no law, you're not going to give them any money. Okay. You're like, oh, too bad for them. So, all right, Glenn died. Yeah, that's a long time ago, dude. There's no spoiler alert on that one. That was national media news. All right, so what are we doing really? Okay, so because people treat each other so terribly, we have to have this entire legal system, both for the civil side, which handles injuries. Usually the civil side is handling injuries, and you have to compensate someone for an accidental or even some intentional torts injury. Then you also, of course, you understand that we have a criminal system. And so those are kind of the two sides of the civil and the criminal system. Now we have, in America, we have what's called federalism. All right, this is where it gets kind of complicated. Wherever you're sitting right now, you're actually being governed by two completely separate sets of laws. You're being governed by your state laws and by the federal government laws. It's called federalism. And you're going to have copies of these slides, so don't feel like you have to write all this down. It's very important that you understand going into law school that you're studying to be a lawyer, and that you will be studying at times things that are coming from state law, but most of the time you're going to be studying federal law. That's the Washington, D.C. stuff. That's mostly what you will study in law school is federal law. And then, because remember I told you you're not learning how to practice law? When you're actually licensed, you'll be doing all of the state law stuff, okay? I happen to practice federal law because I do mass torts, but 90% plus of lawyers are doing the law of their state they're in, not federal law. But you will study federal law in law school because it's kind of I'm not gonna get into that's a long discussion. But anyway, so you have to understand that there's federal law and state law, and it's not the same thing. So this is why I like to joke that we actually have 6 branches of government. So if I asked you, like, what are the branches of government, you ought to be able to rattle off right away: executive, legislative, judicial. All right, those are the branches of government. If you do not know these are the 3 branches of government, go back to my first piece of advice. Quit law school right now, okay? You have to know that how our government works. If you do not know how government works and you want to do law school, you have a lot to study tonight on Wikipedia, all right? You have to, because everything you do in law classes, starting with Barbary next week or whenever those 2 weeks are, is not going to make any sense to you if you don't understand what you're studying. The great majority of time in law school, you are studying a legal case, C-A-S-E, a legal case. You're studying case law. What the frack is case law? That's also a slide later. We'll get into it. So let's start understanding. Now, I say 6 branches of government because you have a legislative, judicial, and executive at the federal level and at the state level. You have them both. And what do these do? Thankfully, as much time as we spend in arguing about politics, the executive branch is the least important branch. All the executive branch is allowed to do really is what the legislative branch says it can do and what the judicial branch interprets the law to say. The executive branch is supposed to carry out the law that the legislative branch writes. As a lawyer, you spend very little time caring or anything about whoever's in the White House or whoever's in the governor's mansion. That doesn't really affect your life much at all as a lawyer. So what does the legislative do? The legislative is the most important. Well, I'd say legislative and judicial are equally important for lawyers. So in law school and on the bar exam, you study and are tested on your knowledge and understanding and the way you analyze rules of law. Rules of law. There's a lot of different rules of law and a lot of different sources. So statutory rules of law are the easiest to understand. If Congress passes a law, they do it as a statute, and now that's a rule of law. Or if in the state, like, let's take a simple one. What's a simple one? Getting a license to drive a car. So the state of Alabama passes a law, the legislative branch, signed up by the governor, becomes law. They pass a law that says you have to be 16 years old in order to take the driving test to become a licensed driver in Alabama. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, that's the rule of law, and that's the statute for it. But it gets more complicated than that. We'll revisit that in a moment, too. But just so you understand what statutes are, okay? Those are rules of law for the legislative branch. But when a law is written, and I should have already gotten this handout before today, it's not as simple as what I just described. It looks more like this. And we're going to spend some time today dissecting this law so you can understand in law school what the F you're supposed to be doing. When you study a rule of law, you want to break it down by its elements. The elements of the rule of law. The elements of the rule of law are simply the pieces and components, when you put them all together, explains the law, explains the rule of law. So, we're going to today spend some time looking at criminal solicitation. This is the law that says you cannot hire somebody to kill somebody or commit any crime. You can't hire somebody to go buy you drugs. You can't hire, I don't know, whatever crimes you want to commit, you can't hire someone to go do them, okay? You can't pay somebody to rob a bank. You're guilty. All right. So, elements. Inside this rule of law, so this rule of law is written by the legislative branch. This is coming from, you'll see it says Alabama Code, Title 13A, Criminal Code Section 13A41. What that means is there's an actual bookshelf of books somewhere, physically, called the Alabama Code, where whatever becomes law is put into these law books. If you pulled out the 13th volume, volume 13A, you will find the Criminal Code of Alabama. In 13A, if you turn to Section 4, this is the first law you come to. That's why it says 13A Criminal Code. That symbol, that weird symbol in front of 13A after Criminal Code is the section. I mean section. Section 13A-4-1. All right. So let's look at these elements. Take a look at it. So back to studying. So let's say you're taking criminal law as one of your classes. And the professor's syllabus says that at class, you're going to be studying 13A-4-1, criminal solicitation. So what does that mean for you as far as studying? Okay, here's a big rule. Always go to class prepared to give the lecture for the professor. What? That doesn't make any sense. Okay? See, studying law is not undergraduate. Undergraduate was so easy. You just don't even know it. Like, it's regurgitation. In high school and in college, how are you tested on stuff? You memorized a bunch of stuff, and then you went to a test, and you regurgitated what you remembered from memorizing. That is not law school. That is not the bar exam. It's way more complicated than that. Let me see if I have a slide. Where's that slide on this? I'm getting ahead of myself, and I like doing that. Okay, yeah, let's go back here for a second. All right, so in high school or college, if you were taking a class about the law and the class was covering criminal solicitation, which is criminal law procedure, it's one of the classes you see listed here, things you'd have to memorize for the bar exam, you would get a question something like, What are the elements of the law of 13A-4-1 criminal solicitation? You would then get graded on whether you were able to write out what the elements were to that law. You will get a big fat F in law school for doing that. Okay, this is why the bar exam in 2024 is so hard for you, and why law school is going to be so hard for you. Memorizing all of this information is the gateway to begin to take a law school exam question or to take a bar exam question. You have to have all of this stuff memorized, completely memorized, in order to begin to answer the questions that you're going to face on the bar exam and from your professors. Knowing the law is not what you're graded on. If you don't know the law, you fail. Okay? You're not graded on knowing the law, though. You're going to be graded, and you will pass or fail the bar exam based on how you analyze the law. Thinking like a lawyer. You're in law school to learn to pass the bar exam. In order to pass the bar exam and to be a lawyer, you have to learn how to think like a lawyer. Okay? Let's say okay a lot. Get back to where I was. So all of those topics are full of laws like this one. This is just one law within that one criminal law. Think about all of those subjects I just put up, and they have hundreds of laws, rules of law like this. And you have to have them all memorized, not so you can pass, so that you can start to take the test. If you don't know the law, you are going to fail the test without it. But if you know the law, you're going to fail the test unless you analyze it correctly. You're only being graded in law school and on the bar exam and how well you analyze. So elements. So what are the elements here? Y'all, this is where, I know this is going to be a lot, and I apologize. This is hard stuff, but better you start working on it now than get a semester into law school, fail everything, and be like, I don't understand why I'm failing. Okay. So if I was studying for class, and I had class coming up, and in that class on the syllabus, the professor said that we're going to be doing Criminal Code 13A-4-1, and we're going to be discussing the crime of criminal solicitation. I would be taking notes on this law before I go to class. I would study the law. I would break it out into my outline I mentioned. This would go into my outline with elements listed. Okay. The elements you see here are not A and B. No. The elements are the pieces. For example, a person is guilty of criminal solicitation. Oh, actually, I can do this with it. Hold on. Let me see if I can share screen differently, and I can actually show you my thinking as I go. Boom, boom, boom. New share. Yeah. Alabama code. Yeah. Does this work? All right. Can y'all see a Word document now? All right. Cool. Let's do this. Okay. Yep. Okay. A person is guilty of criminal solicitation if with the intent. Is that highlighted where y'all can see it? Nod your head. Okay. Here is element number 1. So actually, I can actually show you like as if I was taking notes. So yeah, I'll just do it. I'll show you how to create an outline. Yeah. Okay. So this is Frank's criminal law. Can y'all see that? Criminal law outline. Woohoo. And you can use numbers, you can use letters, you can do whatever you want. So this is going to be, I don't need to actually know 13A-4-1. I know criminal solicitation. So I'll highlight that, copy it, paste it down here, boom. Criminal solicitation. Elements. There's 2 main elements of criminal solicitation, but I'm going to break it down even further for y'all so y'all can really see what I'm talking about. All right. If with the intent, So element number 1 is intent. And now I have intent. You are going to spend so many hours of your life learning what the word intent means in law school. It is a super vague word, as you'll see when we get to that in a minute. All right, so there's my first element, intent. Another person engaged in conduct constituting a crime. Boom, there's element 2. It's really, there's only 2 elements, but I'm just showing this to you, okay? Criminal association intent, and now element number 2, another person engaged in conduct constituting a crime. And then the third element here, he, she's always, doesn't matter, pronouns don't matter in laws. Solicits. We'll just do solicits. It solicits, requests, commands, or imparts. Those are all synonyms for the same word. I'm going to just put solicit in my outline. See, I'm making this simpler so I can remember it easier. Solicits, and then the fourth part was to engage in such conduct. Well, that's really kind of the third element. Another person engage. Yeah, okay. So we'll just have 3 elements. All right. I've now written out 3 elements of criminal solicitation. And now I go to my little phone app. If you're using phone apps, I used index cards. I now make a flashcard. On one side of the flashcard, it says 3 elements of criminal solicitation. And on the back side of the flashcard is this. Now when I'm sitting at red lights, bored, I'm flipping through my flashcards, learning this stuff. When I'm sitting at my desk at work and my boss isn't looking, I'm doing my flashcards. When I've spanked my last kid for the night and stuck their sorry butt in bed, I pull out my flashcards. Whatever you're doing in your life, you're learning and memorizing law. Not because you need to memorize law to get an A, you need to memorize law to be able to take the test, as you'll see in a minute. This all builds on itself. So these are the elements of criminal solicitation. And in actual, I'm not going to go into that, but there's really just 2 elements, these B and C's put together, but anyway. But for your purposes, see, this is what the elements mean. You see how I've taken the pieces of the law and put it together to say you have to have all 3 of these. So if there's no intent, or you actually don't solicit someone, if one of these things is missing, you're not guilty of the crime. But there's more in this law in there. The first thing is called a burden of proof. In criminal law, you'll have burden of proof. So I'll start, then I'll start my next thing down here, burden of proof. And now that I realize I've got another thing here, what I'm actually going to do is move this to be elements. Oops. Yeah. Elements. 3 elements. 3 elements. I'm going to come down here and move all these in. Yeah. See how my outline grows? Yep. Because now I've got a new one. You back up on this. Yeah. Burden of proof is my next one. And I'm going to cheat because I know what I'm doing. And then defense is coming up too. So for burden of proof. So now I have, and I tab in. See, I'm creating an outline of all this. Make it easier to study and learn it. So the burden of proof. You can't be convicted upon the uncorroborated testimony of the person alleged to be solicited. The fancy word for that is solicitee. So I'm going to copy that and post that down here into my burden of proof. All right. And the word and is there. So I'm actually going to try to add the word and. Sometimes there's an or. It means a huge difference if it's an and or an or. I'm going to put a big and in here. And what's the second part of this burden of proof? There must be proof of circumstances corroborating both the solicitation and the defendant's intent. Ooh. Okay. So now I've got the burden of proof in my outline. So guess what I'm going to make? Flashcard. Burden of 2 elements of burden of proof of criminal solicitation. See? This doesn't seem that hard, does it? You're like, we can do this. And then this statute, this rule of law, even has a defense in it. A person is not liable under this section if under circumstances manifesting a voluntary and complete renunciation of his criminal intent. So element 1, that will include circumstances. Defenses, I don't need that burden proof anymore. Okay, tab in, boom. There's 1, I gotta have complete renunciation. So let's say I decide I wanna be the dean of Birmingham School of Law. So I hire some poor soul who needs the money to kill Dean Gary. Yikes. Sorry, Dean, but I want your job. So after I do it, though, I change my mind. Well, maybe I don't want to kill Dean Gary. That's a little bit much. I'll just wait. He'll suck eventually, and I'll get his job anyway. So I renounce my criminal intent. Volunteering, I completely decide not to kill Dean Gary or hire someone to kill Dean Gary that I've already hired. So what do I have to do? I have to prove that I renounced it. First thing is I have to notify the person. So whoever it was that I hired, this will be a subset of this one. So I notified the person of my renunciation. I'm not going to kill him. And this is the funny one. This is hilarious, I think. And I tell the cops. I say, hey, police officer people, I had hired somebody to kill somebody, and now I've changed my mind. I'm not going to do it. All right. Yay, my outline's growing. And I, of course, will turn around and make a flashcard to memorize all this. Yay. So this is a rule of law, and these are the statutes for it. All right. Let me check the chat. Any questions about how I'm making my outline or breaking down the rule of law? Because right now, this might look a lot like college to you. Like, oh, yeah, I did this stuff to memorize stuff for college. The huge difference is why you're memorizing. You're not memorizing to get graded on how well you memorized. So, sure, I'll try to save this and send it out there with the slides. All right. It's not a great example, but it's just I'm doing off the cuff. Okay. So back to the slides. Cool. Yeah. All right, so the legislative branch writes these statutory rules of law. Now, if only it was this simple. It was, whatever the grammar is there, I don't know. If only it was this simple. Or this simple. I think it should be was. Anyway, it's not simple. Simple is what undergraduate studying is and high school studying. This is where this is the very first thing you need to really, really, really get in your head. Ambiguity. This is the most important word to me in legal reasoning and writing, and just everything you do as a lawyer is because something's ambiguous. Ambiguous means it's vague. It means there's a gray area in the black and white. Now, why are things ambiguous? Shouldn't they be unambiguous? Let's go back and look at this law again. Already a lot of ambiguous stuff should have jumped out at you as you just heard these elements. What does intent mean? I mean, really, what if you were to joke with somebody? What if you were like, hey, would you kill someone for me? An actual case I worked on in the law was exactly that. I didn't handle it. I handled it at the appellate level, but she was convicted by a Jefferson County jury of soliciting someone for murder when the person who she solicited admitted he thought she was joking. And she didn't even say anyone specific. She just said, would you kill someone for me? No prices, nothing. 20 years in prison. What? That should raise some eyebrows. That should make you pause. All right. And then conduct constituting crime, that should be pretty easy to, that shouldn't be that vague. Solicits, requests, commands, or empire. You know, even the soliciting, that should be pretty straightforward. Intent definitely wouldn't be. Intent's very vague, something to argue about. But then listen to this. Look at the burden of proof. You can't be convicted unless there must be proof of circumstances corroborating what the solicitee says and the defendant's intent. What does that mean, proof of circumstances? So let's say I hire someone to kill Dean Garrett, and they go to the cops, and there's no other proof of it, just them saying I did it. Guess what? I won't be found guilty because there's nothing corroborating what the person said. So if you're soliciting crime, no, I'm just kidding. So what if, however, I send them a text message the next day? What if my text message says, hey, have you done that thing yet? Have you done that thing yet? What does that mean? Well, in the circumstances of I hired him to murder Dean Garrett, it's pretty clear that probably means, have you killed Dean Garrett yet? Right? But now, is that proof of circumstances corroborating the solicitation and my intent? I don't know. We'll talk about who decides if it is or not later. The point is it's vague. If that was the whole trial, if the whole trial was the person I hired testifying against me and the district attorney put in the text message, guess what the right answer is? The right answer is, I don't care. And guess what? You don't care either. Stop caring about the outcome. This is so important to get your head around. In law school exams and on the bar, really generally, getting the right answer or not is not that important. It is it's the reasoning you do to get to your answer that you're graded on. It is the analysis you show in your essay answers that determines whether you get an A, B, C, D, or F. The actual conclusion you draw does not matter. So if I asked, is that vague text message enough proof? If you had in your head an answer to that question, you're wrong. The answer to the question is, well, who's my client? If I'm the district attorney, I'm arguing my ass off if that text message is enough proof of circumstances. If Wilson, my dad, the criminal defense lawyer, is the lawyer and it's his client, he's arguing his ass off. It's not proof of circumstances. It's up for the jury to decide. So in law school, you've got to quit thinking you're trying to get a right answer or a wrong answer. You're trying to analyze. Analysis is what you're in law school to learn to do. This is why when I said before, memorizing all the law, that's just required to start analyzing. If you don't know that there's this defense or this burden of proof with criminal solicitation, and on the bar exam, you get a question exactly what I've described. A law professor hires someone to kill the dean of the law school. The person testifies against them that he hired, and there's a text message that says, have you done that thing yet? Because see, on the question, on the test isn't going to say, was the burden of proof necessary to corroborate the solicitation of defendant's intent when the text message said, no. On the exams, all you're getting are the facts. You should only be getting the facts. Your exam question from what I'm describing will sound like this. Exactly what I just said. The question will only say, a law professor hires a convicted murderer to kill the dean of a law school for money so he can have the dean's job. The next day, the law professor texts the criminal and asks, have you done that thing yet? The criminal decides not to do that thing and goes to the cops and tells the cops everything because he doesn't want to go back to prison. Discuss, or it might say, at trial, what will happen with the law professor. Everything you see on the screen right here, you have to have memorized in your head. So you can take a fact pattern that you're given in an essay question and analyze the fact pattern based on the rule of law you've memorized in law school. This is not undergraduate exams. Okay. I know this is helping. So, in summary, you have all these rules of law that you have to memorize and learn in law school. Those rules of law let you then analyze fact patterns to be graded on how well you think and analyze like a lawyer. So learning to do legal analysis is what you're trying to do. That needs to be your holy grail obsession, learning to analyze like a lawyer. I genuinely believe the writing class you take is the most important class because you're supposed to be learning legal analysis in that class, how to do it. But you're really learning it in all the classes, as we'll talk about later. All right, any questions on this? Let's see what we got in the chat. That's actually a bit of relief, Jared. Okay. All right, so let's keep going.
I had a question. I chatted you.
Oh, go ahead. You can just ask it.
2 questions now then. Number one, is there any literature or any books, anything that you can reference us to that would help to give some understanding as to how to take notes in a legal class in a law environment? Seems like it's a little different from some other graduate areas.
Yeah, it's a good question. So you're going to spend the time going to class every day, ready to lecture, meaning you are going to have all the material learned, and you're going to be able to get up, and if the professor was to say, hey, Frank, I don't feel like talking today, will you get up and give a lecture on the material we were assigned to read? You get up and you're able to do it because you've spent the hours it takes to prepare, okay?
That section that you just did on that case, though, was very unique. I've never seen anything like that, and I have a pretty extensive background in higher ed, so I think that's what I'm trying to get to. Is there something that would break that down, or in terms of how to analyze case law a little bit, just anything, or is it just something you just pick up gradually?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of answering your question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine. So you've memorized all this law. So you're ready to give the lecture. So what's the point of going to class? The point of going to class is the professor is then going to analyze all of this stuff with you in class. So you listen and write down everything the professor says about how to analyze these rules of law. He'll spend some time making sure you've got the rule of law, and then he'll spend some time, or she'll spend some time analyzing with you. They're a good professor, all right? You'll do it in your writing class extensively. You'll do a ton of analysis and learning how to analyze. The whole 3rd hour of my lecture today is about how to do this.
Okay.
This is just an intro to it. I'm just starting. I'm just getting my point right now is to give you that taste, to see how you're going from college to law school today, first day of law school, to see what you're going to be expected to learn how to do. I'm not expecting you to know how to do it today. I'm expecting you to see, oh, wow, I got to learn how to do this stuff. Okay.
Got it.
This is not something I know right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the point of going to class is not to learn the rule of law in class. You should know that before you go. The point of going to class is to learn how to analyze and to think about the law the way the professor wants you to think about it. It's the Socratic method. What a good professor will do will call on a student for one of the topics on the syllabus and start asking them questions. And how the professor asks the questions is generally leading them, like Socrates, that's why it's the Socratic method, to see how to do the analysis. That's why you should try to write down almost everything that your professor says in class. All right. And review it and add it to your outline later after class. All right. Yeah, dictation recorders are usually allowed, and they're a great idea. I would suggest going back over your entire lecture at least once, if not twice, after class. All right, so if only it's this simple. So we have this code, and now it sounds pretty straightforward. You can memorize these codes, and then you'll get fact patterns. For example, let's say you for one of your classes, you had to know that when you're 16 years old, you can apply to take the driver's test, and that's the law. That's the rule of law. Okay, good. So you get a fact pattern question on your essay exam with your professor that says that Frank Jr. is 13 years old and applies to get a driver's license. What's going to happen? Well, that's pretty easy. You're not going to get questions like that on your bar exam or your law professor question. You see? Because you don't need a lawyer. Anyone can tell a 13-year-old, you can't get a driver's license, idiot. Stop it. Go back to TikTok. So you're going to be getting questions in law school on essay exams and in the bar that is dead center of the gray area. It's going to be very much something you could argue about. You're going to have a lot of fun in class if you have good professors arguing with each other. The professor will tell you, okay, you're the district attorney in this fact pattern. Argue that that vague text message is enough for the burden of proof. And, oh, you over there, you're going to be the criminal defense lawyer. You rebut whatever this person's about to say. So, I mean, the outcome doesn't matter. If the professor, if she told you to do it the other way, you're now the criminal defense lawyer, not the district attorney. Make the other argument. That's a fun thing to do, too. And you have to make all the other arguments the other way around because you're doing the analysis that you'll see later in the lecture. Okay? So it's not this simple. You're going to be asked stuff that is right down the middle. It could go either way. If it was easy, you wouldn't be asked questions about it. So it's ambiguous. Ambiguity, the most important thing. That's what you're doing as a lawyer. Your job is to identify the ambiguity and argue about it. That is what you're doing as a lawyer. How do you do that? All right. This is where we get into analogous and distinguishing. Yeah. All right. So what do we have? So we have these statutes we've been looking at. We talked about the legislative branch that will pass these laws and write these laws. But guess what? We have like 80 trillion people in America. There's no way any legislative branch could possibly write laws so detailed that they cover every situation. So what we have is the judicial branch. The job of the judicial branch is to resolve the ambiguity in the laws the legislators write. So the job of the judicial branch is to resolve the ambiguity in the laws that the legislators write. And this is what I mean. Is the text message that I sent asking the criminal, hey, have you done that thing yet? Is that proof of circumstances corroborating that I intended this person to kill Dean Garrett and I solicited them to do it? Well, a jury will first just make a factual determination, but then when it gets to the appeals level, the Court of Criminal Appeals will then decide whether that meets the burden of proof or not. When the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is part of the judicial branch, makes that decision, they write a case. They release case law. Cases from appellate courts are what you're going to spend over 90% of your time in law school studying. You'll spend some time studying elements of black and white rules like the statutory rule stuff. You'll spend some time doing that. The great vast majority of your time in law school is going to be spent studying case law because there's too many things vague in the legislative branch's job. They can't cover everything. So when you get a case, the case itself becomes part of the rule of law. So you have a statutory or a constitution that says something, and now you have a case from a appeals court that describes or explains it better. It resolves some of the gray area. So the case itself will have a rule of law. For example, let's say 5 years ago, someone was accused of hiring a guy to kill her husband. Again, if it wasn't against the law, half y'all would have done it already. So in that case, there was a text message. And in that text message, she had texted the criminal and she had said, hey, you're supposed to have done this thing by 3 o'clock today, and you're not going to get the other half of your money at 5 o'clock if you haven't done it. Okay. Jury convicted her, and she appealed saying, no, her text message was too vague. The Court of Appeals ruled, no, there's enough detail in this text message to corroborate what the criminal said you asked him to do. We're going to say that your conviction of guilt stands. So they write up and release a case. Your job as a lawyer is to now take the rule of law as it's been modified by that case and argue it. Again, we don't care about the outcome. If you're the district attorney, you're going to say that that case from 5 years ago is analogous to the instant case. Instant case means the fact pattern you have right now in front of you. The district attorney is going to argue, hey, that lady sent a text message, asked if they had done that thing, and the Court of Criminal Appeals said that was enough to convict her with guilt. Then, of course, the criminal defense lawyer is going to go, whoa, slow down. This text message is way more vague than the one 5 years ago that got that lady convicted. So the criminal defense lawyer is going to try to distinguish the case and say they're different. And there's controlling, but we'll get into controlling later, depending on whether we have time or not. But you just got to understand, you got to get your head around what I'm describing right now about analogous and distinguishing, because that's what a case is. So you will spend most of your time in law school studying case law from appellate courts that resolve ambiguity. You then will get graded on how well you argue, usually both sides, that previous case law, the rule of law from previous cases, is analogous to new fact patterns you're given, or you can distinguish those previous cases from the new fact pattern you're given. That's what you're doing on essay exams in law school and on the bar exam. You are taking new fact patterns and you are arguing whether they're similar or not enough to previous case law to come up with a conclusion about what the answer should be. All right. So rule of law is what you got to memorize. There's a lot of different things. I'll rush through this a little bit. We already talked about statutes and constitutions. Constitution, of course, trumps everything, okay? If the state of Alabama passes a law that says you are not allowed to be Jewish in the state of Alabama, or worship the Jewish faith in the state of Alabama, then that will quickly get struck down by the Supreme Court as violating the Bill of Rights, freedom of religion. Constitution says you can study, you can have a faith, you can worship any way you want to worship. It doesn't itself break the law, of course. So Constitution will definitely trump any statutes passed by the federal government, federal legislative branch, or the state legislative branch. Okay, and then also we have all of these rules of procedure, because like we've talked about whether or not I'd be guilty of criminal solicitation for hiring someone to kill Dean Garrett, but we haven't said one word about how did I get arrested, what happened at district court with my indictment, what was the what evidence did the state have to give my criminal defense lawyer before the trial started, how do you conduct the trial, like why is it, who goes first, who asks questions of what witnesses. All of that is called procedure. You will study a lot of procedure in your federal civil procedure class, and you probably will too in criminal if you take criminal procedure. I think that's an elective, but federal civil procedure is a huge topic. How do you sue somebody? Okay, so I hit you with my car, and you want my $1 million umbrella, liability policy. You want to get that $1 million. How do you get what do you actually have to do to get the $1 million? That's the civil procedure. You have to draft what's called a complaint. All right, what's a complaint? What's in the complaint? That's in the rules of civil procedure. What do I do when I've drafted it? Well, you got to file the complaint. You got to pay some money with the clerk's office. How much money? Where do I file it? What jurisdiction? And then what do I have to do after that? Well, you got to give the lawsuit to the person you're suing. Whoever hit you with the car, you got to give them a copy of it. What? That's called service. What's service? It's all in these rules of procedure. In the rules of procedure themselves, there's vagueness. Like if the law says, I'm just making this stuff up. Don't please forget it as soon as I make it up. If the law says that you have 30 days to give someone a copy of a lawsuit when you're suing them, and you can't find the person and you leave it on their front porch, but you come back the next day and the lawsuit's gone, does that count as giving them a copy of the lawsuit? Again, don't get hung up on the conclusion of whether, if you just thought no or you thought yes, don't think no or yes. Think, how do you analyze it? Who's my client? Am I the plaintiff who left the complaint on the doorstep? I'm going to be arguing like Hades that that's enough. It was their residence. They're the only one that lives there. They must have gotten it. That's enough for service of the lawsuit. If I represent the defendant, I'll be like, whoa, you never gave it to my client. My client never physically got a copy from you. So that doesn't count. See the vagueness of the law? That's what you do as lawyers. You argue in the vagueness, the ambiguity. That's the analysis you have to do. Because the good essay question answers, you'll argue both sides. If this was a question I got in a civil procedure essay question on the bar exam or for my professor, and that's exactly the fact pattern he gave me, I would have to know the rule of law about how you serve someone a lawsuit in a civil case. And then I would have to know some cases where it's been discussed before, where other people argued about whether the service was good or not. And then I would write a great essay answer arguing both sides before drawing some kind of conclusion. Conclusion doesn't really matter. The point is I argued it right. I did the analysis. So you have rules of law from Constitution, from statutes, from rules of procedure, and then as I mentioned earlier, the case holdings. What the frack is a case? Is that my next slide? Yeah. Oh, well, there's another. Case holding means two different things too, unfortunately. Sorry, there's so much duplicative language in the law. There's a lot of weird words in the law you get to figure out. The holding of a case means two things. It's the actual outcome of the case. So if I appealed my conviction that my text message was not sufficient to find me guilty to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and they said that they agreed with me and they reversed my case, they threw out my guilty verdict, then the holding of my appellant case is that the guilty verdict was thrown out, was reversed. That's the actual outcome of the case. But usually when we're talking about case holdings, we're talking about what's the new rule of law that comes out of the case. Like, what's the vagueness, the ambiguity that was resolved, and how did it get resolved? So if the Court of Criminal Appeals writes a case in my case, my appeal from trying to kill Dean Garrett, and says, 5 years ago, we said this text message was enough because it had these extra details in it. This text message had no details in it. So our new rule of law is that to corroborate criminal solicitation with a text message, you at least have to have some detail in the text message. It can't be this vague. All right. So now we have a new rule of law that a text message, which you already knew a text message could corroborate from the case 5 years ago. Now it says the text message, though, has to have sufficient detail in it. Well, what's sufficient detail? What if it only had one detail? Hey, have you done that thing at 3 o'clock yet? Uh-oh. Is that sufficient? See, the point, it's like an onion. You can keep going down the slippery slope of arguing more and more specific things to find more and more gray area. And that's good. That's what you're doing in law school. That's what you're here to do. And you will do it a lot as a lawyer based on who your client is. Like, you'll argue the side your client pays you to argue. All right, so what the heck's a fracking case? You should get it by now, I hope. All right. A case is a decision by an appeals court where something was ambiguous in a previous rule of law, and they've now clarified more of the gray area by resolving that ambiguity. So when you read cases in law school, you're learning how a court has decided to resolve an ambiguity, something that was vague in a previous rule of law. Or they'll say there's no previous rule of law on this, and they'll create a new rule of law called common law. Cool. Questions on that? Let me see. Questions on any of this? Let me check questions. All right, so Angie asked a good question about whether there's more case law or statutes and elements on the bar. Okay, all of it's on the bar. You have to, okay, so basically what I'm describing is there's these rules of law. Usually they start from constitutions and from statutes, but then appellate courts will issue cases that keep evolving the rule of law. So the rule of law becomes more and more complicated. It's becoming complicated because there's all these gray areas that have to be cleared up. Because it's impossible to write statutes and write a constitution that covers every possible scenario. Most of what you learn in law school will be case law, and most of the analysis you ever do is case law. Case law, there's far more case law for you to learn and study, and there's far more rules of law evolving through case law than you ever will learn from statutes. Good question. Okay. The trial courts and the appellate courts. This is a cool thing for you to learn, and I think I've got a break coming up anyway, so let's take it now. All right, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to do this stuff and actually start teaching you how to think and act and analyze like a lawyer. So come up with some more questions for me, and I'll be right back. 5 minutes. All right, I don't see any questions. Cool. So let's get back into it. All right. Continuing your remedial education. Hold on. Just a second. I gotta send a work text. Okay. So trial courts and appellate courts. Trial courts are where the facts of the case are applied to the law. Appellate courts do not figure out what the facts of the case are. That's for trial courts. Trial courts is what y'all are used to seeing on TV. Trial courts are where there's a jury, usually there's a jury, and there's a judge, and lawyers are arguing, and there's witnesses, all of that. That's trial court. The cases you read in law school are not coming from trial courts. They're not. Trial courts don't write cases. Trial courts don't issue case law. Because it's the role of the judge at the trial court is to explain to the jury what the jury needs to know so the jury can decide the outcome of the case. And the trial court arbitrates the vagueness that the attorneys argue about through their objections and the evidence they try to put in and the law they want the jury told about. The judge is there as a referee. The judge referees all of these vague areas of the law that the trial attorneys argue about, and the judge is there to instruct the jury on what the jury needs to know to decide what the facts of the case are and how the facts of the case apply to the law. None of that results in a case that you would study as case law in law school. Because here's what happens next. When the jury has decided the outcome of the case, the lawyer or the client really that lost the case will then appeal up to the appellate court. They cannot appeal and argue the facts are different from what the jury said. Jury's the only one that determines the facts, okay? All they can argue about is that rules of law were not applied correctly. Either the jury didn't apply a rule of law correctly, or the trial court judge, him or herself, who made a ruling like, objection, Your Honor, to a piece of evidence. They argue about whether the evidence is allowed under the evidence rules. The judge just say he allows it in. He allows the evidence to go, the jury can hear the evidence. Well, the person that lost may say, no, the judge was wrong. Judge should not have allowed that piece of evidence in. And so they'll appeal to the appeals court and try to get the appeals court to agree with them and reverse the case. Okay? The appeals court is then who releases a decision resolving the issues that were being argued about from the attorney that lost the trial court case. And usually on appeal, especially in civil cases, both sides can raise some issues, and you can get more, it's way more complicated. I'm just giving you kind of, if you understand it like this, you'll be so far ahead of probably where you were before today started. The cases you read in law school are appeals court decisions. Therefore, for you to understand what you're reading in your cases, let's go over a few basic ideas about the court levels. In state court, I'll do the Alabama. Every state's different. I'll give you the Alabama hierarchy, chain of command. We start with district courts. District courts are like gatekeeper courts. We have them because we have so many cases, it would slow the system down if we couldn't get rid of cases from the very beginning. So in civil cases, I don't remember the exact number, but 10 to 20,000. If you're out, basically what you call small claims court is district court. It's if you have a small amount of money you're arguing about in civil court, it will go to district. It will be handled at district court level. If it's a bigger amount of money than they can handle, it will go up to the circuit court. In criminal cases, all the cases will start in district court, just for the judge, the district court judge, to look at a case and say, does the prosecution have enough general evidence to let this go to trial? Okay, so district court and state court is a gatekeeper court like that. There are no jury trials at district court level. If you have a trial at all, it's a bench trial where the judge decides the outcome. This is the only time where judges decide what the facts are. Otherwise, the jury decides the facts. So then after district court, you have what's called circuit court in Alabama. Circuit court is your trial court. This is where you have juries. This is where convictions, you're either convicted. This is where liability is determined in civil cases. Circuit court is what you see on TV. This is where all the action happening. If the losing party at circuit court thinks that the trial court judge or the jury misapplied the law or made a bad did not resolve the ambiguity in a law correctly, they will file an appeal to an appellate court. In Alabama, we have two of them. We have one just for criminal called the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, and we have one just for civil, obviously the Alabama Court of Civil Appeals. They will then issue case law saying if the judge was right or not and how he ruled or she ruled at the trial court level. So the point that should be coming home to you right now, when you're reading case law for law school, like the Kimbrough case I gave you, you are reading an appeals court and how they resolved ambiguity of issues that were raised from the trial court level. If you don't like your result in the Court of Appeals, criminal or civil, you can ask the Alabama Supreme Court to take a look at the case. If they do and you don't like what they do, you can ask the U.S. Supreme Court, super rare, of course, It's rare for the Alabama Supreme Court to take a case, but it's even rarer, of course, for the U.S. Supreme Court to take a case. This is the chain of command in state court. Unfortunately, in federal court, they use a lot of the same words and they mean completely opposite things. I hate that for you, but let's start getting your head around it. So, district court. There is district court at the federal level. There's federal district court. Like in Alabama, like the Northern District of Alabama. However, at federal court, district court is the court where you have trials. It is where the juries are. So district court in Alabama, no trials, no juries. District court, federal district court, you have trials, you have juries. Then, if you lose at district court and federal at trial, the losing party can appeal to the circuit court. There's a bunch of different circuit courts based on, it's usually 2 or 3 states are together for a circuit. Alabama's part of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. See how that can be confusing? Don't get confused. If you're reading a case from the circuit court, federal circuit court, you're reading an appeal in the federal system. If you're discussing or talking about a case in Alabama Circuit Court, you're not talking about an appeal. The case at the Alabama Circuit Court was the trial. Clear as mud. If you lose at this federal district court and you appeal to the federal circuit court and you lose your appeal, whichever side loses the appeal, you can ask the U.S. Supreme Court to consider the case. So this is the hierarchy. That's the chain of command in federal court. You have district courts appealing up to circuit courts who can appeal up to the U.S. Supreme Court. In state court, you have a gatekeeper court called district court. You have the trial court level, which is circuit court. And then you have appeals up to the Court of Appeals, the Alabama Supreme Court, and U.S. Now, what does it mean to be controlling? When you have case law, it came from one of the appellate courts. If the case is from a court higher up in the hierarchy of wherever it is you're arguing your case or your case is being considered, that's considered controlling law. For example, if you go back to my hypothetical where I'm on trial because I am alleged to have tried to hire somebody to kill Dean Garrett, and there's a vague text message from me that says, have you done that thing yet? I'm at trial, so the jury, I'm in the circuit court. I'm in circuit court with the judge and with the jury, and the DA tries to use the text message and tries to submit the case to the jury, that knowing they had to corroborate it and said the text message is corroboration. My lawyer objects and says, no, judge, there's a previous Court of Criminal Appeals case 5 years ago where, say my lawyer says you can't use that text. The district attorney then responds, oh, you can, judge. 5 years ago, the Court of Criminal Appeals said that you can use a text message to corroborate. Here's the case. So the trial court judge must do what the Court of Criminal Appeals said. That case from 5 years ago is controlling because it's in the hierarchy.
So that sets the precedence.
Precedent, that's right. A previous case is precedent. So the trial court judge then says, okay, a text message is enough. My lawyer says, but judge, this one's too vague. This text message is too vague. And the judge is like, nope, we'll let the Court of Appeals decide that. Lets the jury rule. The jury comes back and convicts me. Now I appeal to the Court of Criminal Appeals. The Court of Criminal Appeals then resolves the ambiguity by saying, no, you're right. I mean, of course we said a text message can be used, but this text message is not sufficient. It's not specific enough. So then the district attorney can appeal to the Alabama Supreme Court. If the Alabama Supreme Court takes the case, they are not bound. They could even say, you know what, in Alabama, we're not going to let text messages be corroborating. Anyone can fake a text message. You don't really know who sent a text message. Texting can be, what if somebody's framing Professor Myers and took his phone and sent that text message to try to corroborate it? You know, I'm not saying that's what would happen. I'm just giving you the example is, to the Alabama Supreme Court, the prior decision of the Court of Criminal Appeals is not controlling. It's lower down in the hierarchy. And then, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court can do whatever they want to. Yeah. Jean's asked a good question about federal appeals court trumping state Supreme Court. That's a super complicated answer. You'll have entire semesters of law school dealing with that question. Don't overthink it today. It's a good question. Yeah. No. It's a great question. It's just, it's not even a 4-hour lecture. It's literally weeks and weeks of lectures to figure that out. Conflict of laws and stuff. Okay. So just to keep it simple for y'all, hopefully you can grasp now what it means if case law is controlling. Controlling case law means that the court you're in arguing must follow what this other higher up court has said, appellate court. So in federal court, it's much more simple. There's a district court. They have to do anything that their 11th Circuit has said in Alabama or the U.S. Supreme Court has said. The 11th Circuit has to follow the U.S. Supreme Court. U.S. Supreme Court can do whatever they want to do. That's why it's so important who gets appointed there. All right. So does everybody understand what it means to be controlling? Okay. Persuasive law, though, the other term is controlling. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had one quick question. So you said that the 11th Circuit has to follow what the U.S. Supreme Court says. Could the 11th Circuit differ from another Circuit Court of Appeals?
That's a great transition question, because that's about exactly what I was about to say. If you have case law that is from a court not in your chain of command, that case law is called persuasive. A court does not have to follow it. Often a court will follow it, because usually the rationale in the case that they're just thinking about or discussing or looking at is usually pretty good. There's plenty of examples where parallel courts like other circuit courts don't follow persuasive law, but generally they will. But it's called persuasive. If it's not in your chain of command, the court does not have to follow it, but can follow it. You argue that it's persuasive. Yeah, that answers the question. That's what it is. Yeah. So in Alabama, for example, if in the state of Georgia, the Georgia Supreme Court had ruled that text messages are too vague and you can't use them, you could argue that to the Alabama Criminal Appeals Court, but you would say, hey, this is persuasive. I know you don't have to do what Georgia did, but look, Georgia already handled this in their court system, and this is how they did it. You should do it that way. It's only persuasive, not controlling. All right. Moving on. So let's get into an actual case. I've built up case law. So let's start breaking down case law. All right, first thing real quickly, it's called blue booking. It's how we cite cases. You have to know the blue book. You'll learn it in your research and writing class. All the blue book is it's a little reference dictionary that helps you write out the case citation in a shorthand method. So like the case we're talking about today, somebody first name Kimbrough versus State of Alabama. It was a case that the Court of Criminal Appeals of Alabama decided on March 31st, 1989. If you want to go get a physical copy and look at it in the book, there's a series of what's called reporters that all the cases are published in the Southern series, the second series of the Southern Reporter. If you were to pull out volume 555 and you turn to page 177, you will find the Kimbrough v. State case that you should have in your hands already. Using the blue book, if I was going to cite any of the law or facts or anything about Kimbrough in a brief or a memo I wrote or anything I was writing, I would write it that way. Kimbrough v. State, 544 SO. 2nd, 177, Ala Crim App, 1989. That gives me all the information I need to, or anyone who's reading that citation, that's all you need to go find the Kimbrough State to read it for yourself. It also gives you the critical information. Alabama Criminal Appeals Court and the year. Why is that critical? Well, because I just explained controlling versus persuasive. If I'm writing a brief to the Alabama Supreme Court and I'm citing Kimbrough, there's something in the rule of law in Kimbrough that I want to discuss in my analysis, and I cite it as this, the justices of the Alabama Supreme Court or the other lawyers, everybody reading my brief right away knows that whatever I just said from the Kimbrough case is not controlling. It's from the Alabama Criminal Appeals Court. The year also lets you know how recent it is. Generally, the more recent decisions are given more weight than older decisions generally. That's not, don't get too hung up on that, but it's oftentimes important to know the date. So if I'm citing a case from Kimbrough and my opponent cites a case that's from 2009, not 1989, and says the opposite of Kimbrough from the Alabama Criminal Appeals Court, then his case or her case is going to be more important, is going to rule the day, so to speak, over my older case. So that's why you have the year in there. All right, underlining or italicizing depends upon the word processor you're using in the courts you are filing with. Generally, I think it's okay to either underline or, I always underline because I'm using Courier type in my briefs, which doesn't do italics very well, but it does underline. But there's every court you're filing briefs with will have their rules, and you just read their rules. And anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Okay, so let's do the Kimbrough case. Wait, I already had the break. Okay, Socratic method. Normally at this point, I would call on somebody in class and have you start answering my questions about the Kimbrough case. This is, again, going back to how you prepare for class. Before you ever go to class, if Kimbrough is on your syllabus for that day, you would have studied the Kimbrough case extensively. You would have taken notes in your outline, and you're going to learn this in the Barbary class, called briefing the case. Briefing the case. Usually you'll have a summary of what the facts are, a summary of what the issues are. You'll learn all of this in Barbary more, so in the next couple of weeks, you don't have to get hung up on it now. But you have to go to class ready to talk about the Kimbrough case, for example. And not just talk about it. It could be as bad as the professor saying, okay, you student person, stand up in front of the class and tell us everything we need to know about the Kimbrough case. If you haven't read the Kimbrough case before you went to class, that's going to be pretty hard to do, isn't it? And usually they'll ask you leading questions to see how you analyze. And you learn from how the professor analyzes it, how you hear the professor question the student about the case. And oftentimes a good professor will call on a second student and say, okay, argue that the Kimbrough case is wrong. What vaguenesses would you argue differently, basically? All right. So let's start looking at the Kimbrough case. We flip over to that. Okay. So now you're looking at the Kimbrough case. So what you should be seeing here, this whole first page does not count as part of the case. Westlaw and legal research usually has a synopsis and headnotes where things from the case, somebody's been paid as a staff attorney at Westlaw to read the Kimbrough case, write a really quick synopsis, and give you some headnotes about it. Don't get hung up on the headnotes and don't cite to them. They're not really part of the case. The case really starts down here where it says attorneys and law firm and then opinion. Here's where the case really starts. And it'll tell you what judge wrote the case. So the way that the way that a judge is assigned to write a case, so the briefs from the attorneys are read by all the justices or judges of the court, and then they get together and they discuss it. And then after they're done discussing the case, they vote. So there's 5 judges on the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals. At least 3 of them have to vote in the favor of the outcome that the attorneys. And so when these judges voted, one of the judges who voted in the majority, in this case Judge Patterson, was then assigned, they'll take turns. Okay, your turn to write, Judge Patterson, so you write up the case for us. Which judge wrote it really doesn't matter. What matters is that you learn the case law from it. It only matters more towards when you're actually practicing appellant law, but very few of you will do any of that, so I'm not going to bore you with it today. All right, so that's what that means when it says Judge Patterson. So Judge Patterson wrote the decision for the majority in this case. And the first thing you might also notice is star 178. That does not mean this is the 178th case Judge Patterson wrote. This is the page. If you were to go get the physical book, if you were to go find the 544th volume of the Southern Second Series, you would turn to page 177 to find this case. But as you see, when it's actually pulled up on your computer screen, it starts right here at the top left. It doesn't, start like this. So what Westlaw does is it gives you the page number. When you get to a new page, it'll do star and the new page number. So it's just convenience. And a lot of your cases, your textbooks have this taken out. You don't have to worry about what page it is on the case. This is just for your legal research and writing class. If you were to cite, you have to know what page you're citing to. So the case will start with, usually when you're reading cases in law school, they will start with procedural history. Remember that chain of courts I told you about? So in this case, someone named Larry Stephen Kimbrough, who's also known as Dusty, he was indicted, that would have been at district court level, and subsequently convicted, that's the trial court, after a jury trial, that's the trial court level. In Alabama, that would have been the circuit court. And then what was he indicted and convicted of? The crime we've been talking about today, criminal solicitation of murder. There's the section number, okay? Code of Alabama, 1975. He was sentenced by the jury to 20 years. Might be the judge in Alabama, but anyway, sentenced to 20 years. Yeah, I think it's the judge. So he then appeals, Mr. Kimbrough, raising 3 issues. So what that means is he thinks there were three times the rule of law was not properly followed, where if in any of the 3 times it had been properly followed, he would not have been convicted of solicitation of murder. So that's the procedural history. And usually the case will start with some facts. So just enough facts you can understand what the issues are. There's the indictment. Long story short, all of this are facts. And long story short of that for you guys, you hopefully have read it already, is I think it's he tried to hire somebody to murder his business partner because there was $1 million life insurance policy, and that means he would get the $1 million in his business. Yeah. So he argues 3 issues. And again, we're trying to hurry because we're down to the last, 30 minutes of time or so. He's arguing that there was not sufficient corroboration that he did it. But the evidence of that was insufficient. And one of the reasons that he's arguing it is that there's never been a case in Alabama where the Court of Appeals has explained how to resolve the ambiguity of what it means to corroborate testimony. So issue is whether the evidence was sufficient to corroborate or not. I think John David Strong was the person he hired to do the murder. He argues it wasn't. And that they're going to tell you the conclusion right now, we disagree, meaning the Court of Appeals is going to rule against Mr. Kimbrough, the appellant. So how do they do it? Here's how they do their analysis. You do the analysis the same way. You're going to learn to do analysis like this. First, they tell you what the rule is. Here's the rule. We've already seen it today. All right? And they have a more complicated rule. And look, and remember I told you about elements? And they even go into what the elements of the crime are. The solicitation and the specific intent. They even cite something we haven't talked about today yet, because it hasn't really come up, doesn't really matter. But the offense is complete when the solicitation is made. No one actually has to get murdered. If you hire someone to murder somebody, you're guilty of the crime of solicitation. No one ended up having to get murdered. So don't be hiring people to kill people. But you're allowed to change your mind, as we talked about. And it's because of public interest. You don't want people to be allowed to hire people to kill people or other crimes. The statute is concerned with the prevention of the harm and protecting citizens. It's legislative intent. So, in resolving the issue at hand, this is how they're going to do their analysis. They must construe that portion of the solicitation statute requiring corroboration and proof of circumstances. So they're telling you right here what is vague in the rule of law. What I have highlighted is what is vague about the rule of law. Yes, you're allowed to change your mind, tell the person that not to do it, and you have to go tell the cops what you did and that you changed your mind. If you do those things, they cannot find you guilty of it. Up until the point you tell the cops you changed your mind, you're guilty of it. Okay. All right, so back to the issue. So what's the legal issue? Spotting the legal issue is the hardest part of law school. We'll talk about issue spotting later, but here the court is in their analysis. They've laid out the rule, and now they're telling you what the issue is, what's ambiguous, and they're straightforward. No court has ever done this in Alabama, and that's what they say. Our courts have not previously been called upon to interpret this vague provision. That means, a couple of new words for y'all, that means this is a case of first impression in Alabama. Case of first impression means this issue has not been addressed before in this jurisdiction. Another Latin phrase we use for that is de novo. De novo, meaning it's new. So, what do they do? How do they analyze it? Well, they turn to prior case law in other states. Not because the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals has to follow what Texas did. They're going to end up following what Texas did. But this is just, again, for persuasive reasoning. What they're about to do is they're about to go through how Texas resolved this question. Texas has a very similar statute, almost word for word, to the Alabama statute. And they then go through how Texas went through and resolved the issue. What Texas did was Texas said, hey, we don't have any case law or further statutes on how you corroborate the solicitee accusing someone of hiring them to kill somebody. We don't have anything. But what we do have is we have a lot of case law and a lot of rules about how you corroborate accomplice testimony. All right, don't let your head spin. This isn't complicated. See, accomplices are convicted of the same crime as whoever the worst person in the group does something. If I'm driving the getaway car and in order for you to go in and rob a bank and you rob the bank like I thought you were, but I told you don't shoot anybody, but you shoot somebody, I'm still convicted of the murder of you shooting somebody as accomplice. It doesn't matter that I only wanted you to rob a bank. Okay? So therefore, you see a lot of examples of where accomplices will turn and give evidence against their accomplices. They'll turn on the other people. And I'm not sure, Gene. Gene's asking if either the briefs, the parties talked about that. I don't have the briefs. There are some briefs sometimes available to read, but hopefully the prosecution did that. Hopefully the prosecution, that would be the Attorney General's office in Alabama on the appeal side. Hopefully they found the Texas law and argued that, hey, this is a good way to do it. And the Court of Criminal Appeals did it on their own. But the court can do it on their own. They don't have to follow the brief. They can ignore the briefs altogether and decide what they want to decide. Anyway, so we don't have any law on the books in Texas on how to corroborate solicitee testimony, but we have lots of law about how to corroborate accomplice testimony, because accomplice testimony is unreliable. If the guy that went in the bank and shot somebody was wearing a mask, and the driver was wearing a mask, and later the two guys are arrested, both of them are going to say the other guy's the one that shot somebody. I didn't shoot anybody. I was driving the car. So corroborating those kind of testimony, or a deal's cut. The DA doesn't like one of them, and so the district attorney is like, if you'll testify against him that he's the one that pulled the trigger and shot him, which means they're more likely to get the death penalty, we'll give you only like 20 years, not the death penalty. And so they're like, yeah, I'll take 20 years in prison over the death penalty. So then that person becomes the accomplice who takes the stand and testifies against and says, that guy went into the bank and shot somebody. Not me, it was that guy, but up to that point, that guy had been like, neither one of us did it. We were asleep at home. We had nothing to do with this. Now he can't really, he can say it, but the jury's like, well, no, the guy admitted that y'all did it. He's just, anyway, see what I'm saying? There's a lot of motivation for accomplices to lie. So therefore, the law requires the accomplice testimony to be corroborated with the circumstances, and they have a whole list of examples of stuff that corroborates accomplice testimony. So when Texas was faced with how do we corroborate solicitee testimony, we don't have any rules on this. Texas just said, hey, we're going to take all of our rules for accomplices and apply them in these situations. Now we suddenly have lots of rules of law and lots of prior cases to look at. And so Alabama said, hey, that's a good idea. We've got a ton of rules on how to accomplices' testimony is corroborated. So we're going to do the same thing. And that was the legal holding of this case. We find the decisions of the Texas court to be persuasive, and we adopt their reasoning in construing our statute. And they even said California does. They give you another example. Then they went on to say, hey, California does the same thing. And then they go into the rule of law. So they have all this case law. The big case on it is called Lynn v. State. Highlight it, okay? Didn't highlight. There we go. Now you can see it. I know just from the citation, Lynn v. State was an Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals case from 1984. So 5 years before this case, they laid out a whole lot of grounds, here they are, on how you corroborate accomplice testimony. What does it even mean to corroborate? There's so many vaguenesses in the statute, but fortunately they've already discussed what all these things mean. Okay? So then they say, so in construing the corroboration of the solicitation, they're going to do it in conjunction with the requirements of the accomplice. And so then they hold, and so you see how they're doing the analysis? They're using the rule of law, and they're applying the facts of this case to it. And they do that, you can tell they're starting to do that when they say in the instant case. That's another word, another phrase you need to know, in the instant case. On your law school exams and on the bar exam, the instant case, when you say in the instant case, you're referring to the fact pattern you've just been given in the problem. That's the instant case. Okay, so then they discuss what their standard review is. You'll learn a lot about this stuff later. Don't get too hung up in the weeds right now. I'm just trying to teach you what case law is. so you understand better what you're doing preparing for class and even going to your Barbary class for 2 weeks. One of the standards of review, for example, is that whenever someone loses a case at the trial court level and the jury ruled against them, all the evidence is then looked at by the appellate court in the light most favorable to whoever won the case. It helps a lot to win at the trial court level to win on the appeal, because once you win at the trial court level, the appellate court assumes, because they're not going to take the place of the jury, they're going to assume all the facts in the light most favorable to whoever won at the lower level at the trial court. Respect the jury's decision. And then notice what they do, they go into facts. Okay. And this is a lot of facts they talk about. You're going to see why this is important in a minute. I'm giving you the most important 20 minutes at the end. Well, no, maybe getting obsessed about all this is really the most important part. All of this is facts. All of this blue up highlighted is them discussing the facts of the case in the light most favorable to the state, because the state won the case. And only after they do all the facts, this last little bit is we find, here's their conclusion. From all the stated facts and circumstances, there's sufficient corroboration and the evidence presented by the prosecution satisfied the requirements to corroborate, and therefore they affirm the jury verdict. And in so doing, in this case, they gave us a new rule of law. If you need to corroborate, we already knew you had to corroborate a solicitee's testimony against you. When the guy takes the stand against me that says I hired him to kill Dean Garrett, now we have the new rule of law. You have to consider all of the evidence the same way you would corroborate an accomplice. Because we have lots of case law about that, even though we don't have much of any case law about the other. Now, take a deep breath on this. Right now, you should have a pretty decent idea for the first time, maybe, what case law is. Gene asked a good question again. Do we need to note the test in outlines or briefs? Gene, follow up with me on what do you mean by note the test? Do you mean, what do you mean? All right, so you should have a really good idea right now what a case is. A case is an appellate court decision where a vagueness in a rule of law, either from a statute or a prior case, was analyzed and the vagueness was resolved. So there's less gray area now in the previous rule of law. Your job is to keep learning all of these rules of law, keep seeing how these vague gray areas get resolved over and over again, so that you can take a new fact pattern made up by your professor or made up by the bar examiners, a bunch of hypothetical nonsense. They'll give you the facts, and usually with very little of any questioning, you have to figure out from what you know about the rule of law how to analyze that new fact pattern. So how do we actually do this legal analysis stuff? Let me go back to my share. Why is my mouse disappearing? There we go. Okay, so I showed you the procedural history. It's what's happening in the chain of command in the case. You know, that's going at the district court level. This person was indicted. At the trial court level, they were convicted. They were sentenced to 20 years, and now here we are at the Court of Appeals. You'll see more procedural history when you deal with like a state Supreme Court, or you'll see it in a U.S. Supreme Court decision, especially. Lots of appellate courts have already ruled on these vaguenesses, and you'll see that listed out and described in the procedural history. You'll see a standard of review. I've already given you an example of one. That's where the appellate court has to look at the facts of the case in the light most favorable to how the jury decided the case. Because the jury decides facts. Judges don't decide facts. Juries decide facts. And then you saw what the court did, and this is a new phrase for you. This is not the country. I've been to that country. This is the acronym for not how you do the analysis, but how you present your analysis. All right? You present your analysis generally using the IRAC method. So when you're done doing your analysis in your head and then your notes, and you're ready to actually write your essay answer, or you're ready for either your professor or the bar exam, you generally will want to use IRAC. What does IRAC stand for? Hold on, I got a chat. Let's look. Oh, I'll come back to that in a minute, Gene, because I'm going to be talking about that. First thing is, what's the issue? I told you how important it is to spot the issue. The R stands for the rule of law. Amani Washington. Sorry, wrong. Don't be arrogant. Remember, I warn people, you think you know something. Don't think you know anything. Don't even try. Just clear your beautiful minds and let the professor's words just fill your heads. Okay? Your analysis follows your rule of law. And then remember, it's not important, but you draw a conclusion. This is how you present your answer. Issue spotting. Oh my goodness. This is one of the most, if you're not going to pass the bar exam, if you're going to flunk law school, if you're going to make bad grades, oftentimes it's because you're not good at issue spotting. The issue of the case is kind of what rule of law is vague, and how you resolve that element of the rule of law is going to determine the outcome. That's the issue. So like in the case we just looked at, the Kimbrough case, the issue was the evidence, was it sufficient to corroborate the solicitee's testimony? Why was that the issue? Because in Alabama, we'd never had a court of appeals tell us what that means. And since it was vague, it became the issue. If there was enough evidence to corroborate, then the guilty verdict from the jury is going to be upheld. If there's not enough evidence to corroborate, then the jury verdict's going to get reversed. So the way I'd phrase that issue if I was writing this on an essay exam is something along the lines of, under the Alabama law requiring corroboration of solicitee testimony to convict someone for criminal solicitation, is there sufficient, that's the does, is there sufficient evidence when, and then you remember those 3 long pages I highlighted of facts? Some of that a little quick summary of that would go in the next part, the issue statement. And you can also flip it around and use the weather version. You'll get this in your legal writing class. Don't get hung up right now. I'm just getting your heads right so you know the stuff you've got to figure out when you get to Barbary for 2 weeks, and when you get to your legal writing class and you get to your substantive law classes like torts. Issue spotting. The issue is what's vague. What is vague that will change the outcome? Because see, this is so important. Like, you can write a beautiful essay example, just gorgeous. You can have all kinds of rules of law in it. You can have great previous case law you've learned. You can argue both sides of it and still fail if all you're talking about isn't the issue that matters. So, for example, if in the fact pattern I gave you, your law school essay exam question is, Professor Myers hires a criminal to kill Dean Garrett so he can become the dean, blah, 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 you know, will this be upheld? Will the jury's verdict be upheld? Question mark. And you start to write your answer, and you were like, you remember, oh, I remember all these cases about intent. If they're joking, there's a lot of cases about joking around. And you'll be like, oh, let me write about that. So you'll say, well, Professor Myers will argue that he was joking and he didn't really mean it when he hired Dean Garrett. And then you'll put all the case law about intent. You'll argue, oh, no, the prosecution will say intent is because of these facts in the case. You'll argue both sides. In conclusion, it's likely the Court of Appeals will say there is enough evidence of intent here, and you'll get a big, fat, beautiful F. Because intent wasn't what the fact pattern, nothing about intent was in the fact pattern. The fact pattern is about whether my text message was enough to corroborate my conviction. So if you F up and you get the issue wrong, you're going to get an F. What do you think F stands for? You've got to get it right. You've got to be able to know the law so well that when you're reading the fact pattern and without your professor or the bar examiner saying, is there enough evidence to corroborate, all they're going to ask you is, will the jury verdict be upheld? See? You have to then know they'll never use the word corroboration anywhere in the question. Corroboration, nothing about accomplices, none of that will be in the question. You have to know the law. You have to know that a criminal solicitation has to be corroborated using the same rules as accomplices when an accomplice testifies against somebody. See how this is not undergraduate, where you just regurgitate nonsense back to the professor? And you see how knowing all the rules of law and the cases that go with them are just gateway. You got to know all that stuff just so you could read a new fact pattern and figure it out what the F you're supposed to be talking about and how to talk about it. This is why you need to be studying for the 2024 bar exam now, making your flashcards, making your outlines. You've got to know this great big volume of information just so you can begin to do legal analysis. It's a lot. It's okay to quit today. This is going to be really hard to do. I like box flashcards. I like to compare box flashcards to the ones I make myself. But when in doubt, if you see a difference in the, I would make my own flashcards and then sit there and compare them to the box ones. Sometimes I'd miss, oh, I didn't even have a flashcard on this. I didn't realize, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Or mine will be too wordy and the box will have a simpler way to say it. Oh, that's a much easier way to say it. The less you got to remember, the better. You see, so that's a good question Keisha asked me. It was about whether you want to do box flashcards. My answer is yes, do both, okay? All right, so that's issue spotting. Rule spotting. It goes hand in hand with issue spotting. You got to know the rules so well that when you read my fact pattern about Dean Garrett, even though the word corroboration doesn't appear anywhere in the fact pattern, nothing about accomplice testimony. Why would it be about accomplice testimony? This is a criminal solicitation case. Sorry, so I'm on a boat. I thought someone was about to hit my boat. I'm all right. You got to know the rules so well that you immediately go, oh, wait, criminal solicitation? That testimony has to be corroborated. That's what the controlling rule is. And the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals said that you have to use accomplice testimony to do it. See? Is this starting to make sense now? I hope it's starting to make sense. That's a lot. You can review these notes on your own. And then how do you resolve the ambiguity? You should have noticed it by now. I'm going to give you the big secret of legal analysis. Facts. Facts, 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 facts. When you're writing your essay answers, use lots of facts. Why? Because when you distinguish a case or you say a case is analogous, the only way to do it is to take the facts of that previous case and compare it to the facts of your case. I did this earlier for you and you may not have noticed it. Remember when I told you for the first time, oh, there's that case from 5 years ago where a text message said, hey, did you do that thing at 3 o'clock like I gave you that money to do or whatever? That was legal analysis using facts. Then the district attorney argued, hey, it's a text message. Did you do that thing? That fact in that case is similar to our fact. It's analogous. And no, The criminal defense lawyer turned around and said, no, it's distinguishable. In that case, the facts were that the text message had lots of detail. In our case, Professor Myers' text didn't have much of any detail. It was super vague. You don't know what he's talking about. See how we're doing this? You use facts to argue whether prior case law ambiguity resolutions should be applied to your new fact pattern or not. And the thing is, you don't have to know the name of the cases. You don't. My flashcards never had case names on them because it doesn't matter. Like, let's say I wanted to answer a bar examiner's question and use the Kimbrough case, where the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals for the first time said, we're going to use the accomplice testimony rules when we're resolving ambiguity with solicitees. I don't have to say Kimbrough. No. All I got to do is say the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals previously decided a case in which a business partner hired someone to shoot his business partner, and said in that case that they're going to follow what Texas does, and they're going to apply the accomplice rules. I'd get all the points for saying that. I get lots of points. I didn't have to say Kimbrough. I got to say enough so one, the professor or the bar examiner knows I know the Kimbrough case because I just talked about it without saying it. And two, it applies. It's issue spotting and rule spotting. And really, three, I said it correctly. I knew the Kimbrough case and said it correctly. So we compare case law to case law by using facts. So please start from the very beginning of law school, focusing on what the facts are, where the rule of law was created, so you can do legal analysis arguing the facts. Persuasive versus objective writing, I don't have time for that. You'll get it in your legal research and writing class. So the big picture. All right. This IRAC method of describing the issue, then describing the rule, then doing the analysis and drawing the conclusion, it's just a convenient way for you to present your ideas. You right off the bat, you talk about what the issue is. You then regurgitate the rule of law you know, and then you analyze how. You've identified the gray area in your issue, you describe the gray area, and you describe how to resolve the gray area in the rule. And you do that by using facts. Well, this is like the Kimbrough case, because where the business partner tried to get shot, they listed 13 pieces of facts that you had to have, blah, blah, blah. You compared to the instant case, where in this instant case, there were these facts that are the same. So the district attorney will argue that the Kimbrough case does say this is sufficient evidence, and the criminal defense, and then you argue the other side. If you want your A, you can get it all right, but if you don't argue both sides, you're not getting an A. You shouldn't get an A if your professor is any good. And then you see now what I meant by conclusion doesn't really matter much. You see, yeah, there probably is oftentimes a correct conclusion or incorrect conclusion, but it doesn't matter. I know I don't, and any decent professor doesn't really care whether you came up with the right conclusion. He cares that you spotted the right issue, you knew the rule. She's going to look at your analysis to see that you're arguing both sides and you're using facts to compare previous rules of law to this new vague fact pattern. If you do all that, okay, which side are you coming down on? Oh, you're going to say it's enough evidence? Okay, fine. You said it's enough evidence. Even all the time, judges can't even decide to conclude. You'll see, what's the Supreme Court almost every time? It's 5 judges on one conclusion, 4 judges on another conclusion. It's 5-4 decisions almost all the time. And they're doing the same issue spotting, rule spotting, and analysis you're going to be learning. And they come up with different decisions. So don't think the conclusion, don't get hung up on it. Get hung up on you learning how to do analysis. And don't be discouraged, okay? I mean, I'm trying to discourage you in some ways because at least a third of y'all probably should quit, just being honest. Some of y'all aren't going to pass the bar. You're not going to be obsessed with it the way I'm telling you to be obsessed. You're not going to completely change your life today to do nothing but study as much as you possibly humanly can study for the bar exam. You might be doubting yourself that you're capable. That's baloney. I want to cuss so bad. It is so baloney, okay? Have you ever heard of the 10,000 hour rule? So for 4 years of law school, if you put about 2,500 hours in a year, you'll probably be ready to pass the bar exam. So what would that be per, let's figure that. I've never even done the math. If we did 2,500 hours of going to class and studying in a year, it's 52 weeks. Are we going to take 2 weeks off? Yeah, I'll say 50 weeks. That sounds, so 2,500 hours. Someone asked me how many hours a week, divided by 50 weeks. Okay, so just put 50 hours a week into law school. Now, do that with a full-time job and a full-time family. Okay? Because the thing is, every one of you in this Zoom call, every stinking one of you can pass the bar exam if you choose to be this obsessed. Whatever talent you think you have for writing or being a lawyer, there's no such thing. Talent is such a made-up idea. Okay? What do we know? You know, talent, it doesn't even exist. There's no such thing as talent. There's nothing in your DNA that says you're going to be good as a lawyer or not. There's nothing in your DNA. If they did genetic DNA testing, they'd find no correlation between DNA and passing the bar. There's no. You know what? You have talent for what you practice. This is another of these books I think you should read from Professor Colvin. Listen, some little 6-year-old shows up at baseball practice and can catch and throw the ball the best. Well, because that kid's mom just spent a year while their kid was 5 years old. Guess what they were doing every day for fun? They were throwing a baseball around every day for their whole age 5. So then they go to their first t-ball team at age 6, and everyone says, whoa, this kid is so talented. So the kid hears it and believes it. Now the kid thinks he's got talent for baseball. He didn't have talent for baseball. He just practiced it a lot. Now he's suddenly the talented baseball kid. You following me? That can be you, though. People can be, man, I wish I was that law student. All that law student is doing is practicing the most. And what are they practicing? Practice your weaknesses. If you're not good at issue spotting, practice issue spotting. You can get, there's so much material on the internet. There's so many people trying to sell you services for bar prep. You can just take example essay questions from the past, and they have model answers. You read the question, you try the question on your own, and then you compare it to the model answer. Do that. Practice this stuff deliberately. You shouldn't go into your first law school exam having never taken a law school exam. You do it on your own with practice exams. Because I don't have time to go into the whole thing, but the jobs you end up being good at, the jobs you practice a lot, you like your job. The stats show the longer you do your job, the more you like it. That's because you get good at it, and you can really, because you get to quit trying because you're so good, you don't have to really put any effort in at work. I hope that's the job you have, because you need to spend all your extra time at work studying for the bar, not working. You guys got to figure out how to do as little work as you can while you're at work and study for the bar. All right. Now, for some of you, grammar. I can tell you I have seen some terrible, if you think your grammar's bad, it is bad. If you think your grammar's just average, it's probably bad. You can practice grammar. You can go online today and sign up for an online grammar class. There's websites that have like free stuff. You can put grammar apps on your phone to practice grammar. You can go into Books A Million and buy you a $5 grammar book. You know, some of y'all have kids that are taking grammar classes. Go take their workbook and do the exercises. You can get better at grammar. And like I've already mentioned today, you have to prepare for class like you're going to get up and do the lecture. You outline all of the rules of law you're assigned. You read and brief all of the cases, and then you sit there and you try to get your head around it. Try to understand the material for class yourself before you go to class. Try to spend so much time on it, and even in small study groups, figure out together. Remember, the networking is so important. Figure out together, what am I supposed to know about this class? Then when you go to class, all you have to do is take notes on how the professor analyzes the material. You're not trying to learn the material for the first time. You're paying attention to how the material's being analyzed. What is the professor emphasizing when he or she's calling on different students? What kind of questions is he asking? What's the gray area getting resolved? You can go to class ready to actually learn to think like a lawyer instead of going to class like you did in college, having no idea what the class topic is today. You're just going to sit there and take notes if you're lucky, if you're not multitasking by looking at ESPN on your phone or something. You got to knock all that nonsense out. And like I've said, I already showed you how to start a bar prep outline. It's that simple. You take a Word document and you start studying for the bar by taking your materials and outlining them in your bar prep. Start your flashcards now. Look at whatever the first assignments you have in your classes. Take the barbering materials. Start making flashcards from your prep outlines. And practice the deep work. Get off social media. Don't have distractions on. Cancel your Netflix. Get rid of all that garbage, or just be average law student. You don't have to pass the bar. I don't know why you're in law school for 4 years if you're not going to, though. It's perfectly fine to be average if you don't care about wasting your life for 4 years. Or if you want to go to law school just to learn the law stuff. That's, again, I'm not knocking people like that. My lecture is directed to the person who wants to actually be a lawyer. All right. Think about questions you have and put them in the chat box. I'm going to hang around. But let me end with this. I love hiring Birmingham School of Law people. Love it. I love getting Birmingham School of Law people, graduates or licensed lawyers, working on cases with me. Love it. Why? Why do I love that? Hold on, I got a private message about my boat. Oh yeah, after this, I can show you all around the boat a little bit afterwards if you want to. Okay. But don't be thinking about stuff like that. You gotta be thinking about the bar exam. All right. I don't know critical pass flashcards. Yeah, I'm keeping it real, Steve. I'm keeping it 100, as my daughter says. All right. I'm gonna have Dean Garrett email out the PowerPoint. I use Tape Talk Pro as my recorder on my phone. I just record right on my phone and then download it to my Dropbox. So, all right. Why do I hire so many Birmingham School of Law people, and why are y'all really impressive? Because listen, dudes and dudettes, I had it easy in law school. All I had to do was go to class 3 days a week, 4 days a week for 2 or 3 hours a day, whatever. Yeah, Tape Talk Pro, that's right. That's all I had to do. I didn't have to work a job. I was fortunate. I didn't have a wife and kids, all right, or an elderly parent I was having to change diapers of. I mean, whatever it is you guys are dealing with in your life, it is way harder to do law school the way you're doing it. If you're able to do your family and boyfriend, girlfriend, kid commitments, do your job, full-time work you have, and do 50 hours a week of law school the way I'm telling you to do it, so you actually are one of the few students from Birmingham School of Law who passes the bar, you impress me. You impress me more than the pampered Alabama law students and the Cumberland. They may be all smarter and have better professors and think they're more not. But guess who's going to get out and hustle in the real world and do a damn good job as a lawyer? It's you guys. So there is a little rainbow here that has a little bit of gold at light at the end of the tunnel, whatever you want to analogy I want to butcher. You guys are more impressive to me than the full-time law students, because you're a full-time law student with a full-time life and a full-time job. If you're willing to make the commitment to completely change your life, to be obsessed with practicing the law by passing the bar exam and finding a job when you graduate and having a great network of people you love, your classmates, your professors, people that can send you work to do, you might be one of the few that actually make money and do this right. But that's all up to the third and hardest obstacle I talked about today, you. All right, chat me your questions. I'm just going to hang out for a little bit. Yep. Don't blow up on. Do the galley view or something. Yeah. too much me in that image. All right, let me start going through some chats. Thank you. Welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Take Tall Pro. Yep. Welcome. Yep. Go get it. Get after it. Good luck. It's not luck. It's hard work. Thanks. Enlightening. I told you, Robert Stewart, I told y'all I was going to change some lives today. That sounded like some, this guy, what's he talking about? What's Dingy? What? And then you look, and then you're like, whoa. Well, my
Professor
life.
Myers, I do have a quick question, sir.
Okay, hit me up.
In your experience, it seems like, taking your stuff is going to be really cool. But, in looking at this, it's a lot. Like, it's a sensory overload. Like, everybody on this call's a professional. And I think for me, I've never failed at anything.